ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into part 1 of the series, so be sure to stick around until the end. And let's get started. As Inko was walking down the street, a gust of wind blew her handkerchief out her hand. When a tall man bent over to pick it up, when he returned it, he introduced himself. "My name is Sahi Shigaraki. What's your name?" "Inko," she replied. She began to blush. "I was on my way to work when the wind blew my handkerchief out of my hand." "Thank you for returning it," she said. He looked at her and smiled. "Would you mind joining me for a drink later?" She blushed, and they exchanged numbers. At first, it was bliss. They dated, she fell in love, and he was kind to her. The house he built for them was huge, 5 bedrooms and 4 acres of property. For years later, everything had changed. He was pure evil, and he went by a different name, all for one, and she couldn't get away. Their child just turned 4 when she saw him use his quirk for the first time and knew she had to get him out of the house and away from his dad at all costs. Inko was planning their escape when her room door suddenly opened. A man bursted into her room, pointing a gun at her. Then he shouted at her, saying he was going to kill her for what her husband did to him. Inko knew it was now or never. She looked at the man and said, "I don't care if you kill me, just get my son out of here." The man went silent, shocked by what she said. Inko's eyes began to fill with tears. "Please take my son and run, get him out of here. He is in terrible danger." The man lowered the gun and said, "Hurry up and come with me." He knew he was going to die today. Nobody crosses Shigaraki and lives. But if he could get her out of this house and hurt his plans, then it would be worth it. As they got to the window where he entered the house, they were spotted. He drew his gun and shot the first man that entered the room. He yelled at Inko, "Run, get out of here. I'll cover you, go." She held Izuku tightly as she jumped out the window and began to run as fast as she could. As she was running, she heard more gunshots and then horrible sounds of the man screaming out in pain. She never even knew his name, but he helped her escape, and now she had a chance to save her son. Back at the house, Dr. Shigaraki walked into All for One's office and calmly said, "Your wife is gone, and she took your son. Oh, and I did like you asked, and analyzed his quirk, and it ranks off the charts. Total area, spatial manipulation down to the molecular level. He will be a monster when he grows up with the proper training, of course." "No, doctor, I think I'll take that one for myself. Bring the child back to me. As far as his mother, I don't care what happens to her. I want that quirk." Dr. Shigaraki, "Yes, master. I'll make sure we get your child back. I'll send out the word." Before the doctor could leave, he heard AFO say, "Make sure they don't hurt my son. If they do, I'll deal with them personally." The doctor replied, "Yes, sir, I'll let them know," and then left the office. AFO thought to himself, "Inko, this is how you repay me for my kindness. If they bring you back, I'll make sure that you will never repeat this mistake again." Inko ran, hiding in alleys, trying to get to the police station or to find a pro hero when she felt a sharp pain in her leg. When she looked down, there was a dagger sticking out of her calf. She held on to Izuku tightly and began to run again. As she turned out of the alley, she felt 2 more stab wounds, this time at her side, but Izuku was still safe. It was getting hard for her to run. She was gasping for air when she saw him. "I can make it," she thought as her vision started to blur. All Might saw the woman running holding a child when 2 daggers hit her from the side. The child was crying. He bolted towards the woman and caught her before she fell. She said, "Please take my child. Keep him away from his father, Shigaraki. All costs." Then her grasp on the child faltered. He grabbed the child and gently laid her down. The child was screaming. 2 people emerged from the alley. One was holding daggers, and their eyes went wide when they saw him. All Might put the child down, and then he held on to his mother. As they tried to run, All Might knocked them out. All Might tied them up and contacted the police. The child's mother died there in his arms. As he cried, All Might picked him up. The child looked at him and asked him to save his mom. All Might felt the lump in his throat as he told the child he couldn't save his mom. When the police arrived, All Might was holding the child who was crying on his shoulder. All Might covered his mom with his cape to keep the child from having to see her. As the police searched the woman's belongings, they found a picture of her holding the child, wearing my All Might onesie and her ID that said her name was Inko Shigaraki. When the police tried to take the child from All Might, he remembered this mother's last words, keep him away from his father, Shigaraki. She couldn't mean AFO, could she? All Might decided he couldn't take the chance and told the police that the child was staying with him for now. All Might walked away with the child. He cried himself to sleep. He didn't know what to do. When the child woke, he looked at me in awe. He just realized who I was. All Might asked him for his name, and he told him Izuku. When I asked him did he have any family in the area, he said only his father. I asked him to tell me what his father looked like. My stomach dropped when he described him. It was him. AFO was this child's father. All Might couldn't put him in police custody or foster care. AFO and his minions would find him and take him. So he decided that he would care for him and keep him safe. I looked into Izuku's big eyes and asked him, would you like to live with me for a while? The little boy began nodding his head, and I took him home. Back at AFO house, Dr. Shigaraki knocked on the door. AFO said enter. The doctor gave him the news on how Inko died and the boy was rescued by All Might himself. The wooden desk began to creak as AFO placed both of his hands on it, pushing down. Where are the two that was supposed to bring Izuku home, he asked. Dr. Shigaraki said they are in jail right now. AFO said please ensure that they don't live to see their court date. You can leave now, doctor. I need to figure out how to bring my son back home. As All Might entered his house with Izuku, he realized two very important things. One, the child didn't have any clothing, and two, he didn't know what this child liked to eat or had any allergies. He decided to reach out to some of his friends over at UA to help him get everything he needed to raise a child for a while. When he was done with his phone call, he showed Izuku around his house and showed him where his new room was. He asked Izuku if he was hungry, and the child said no. He could still see the hurt in the child's eyes. For the first time in All Might's hero career, he was completely lost. He never expected to take in a child. Hell, he didn't have a clue on how to raise one. But he knew this was something he couldn't fail at, so he looked into Izuku's eyes and smiled. If you want to grow up big and strong like me, you have to eat. How about I make you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for now with a glass of milk? Izuku nodded his head, and All Might got the food ready. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. When All Might opened the door, Dean Nizu, Recovery Girl, Midnight, and Mr. Aizawa were standing at the door. All Might invited them in, and they all were carrying bags. Some had clothing, some had food, and some had toys. Dean Nizu looked around and asked where was the child. All Might told him he was asleep in a spare bedroom. Then he began to tell them everything that happened, then Mother's warning and Izuku describing his father. All of the professors were stunned. All Might asked Recovery Girl if she could check Izuku out for any health conditions and who he could take the child to get his quirk tested. Recovery Girl smiled and asked him to lead her to the child and that she would take care of all of it. Izuku woke when he heard the door open. It was All Might and a short woman dressed like a nurse. He quickly sat up, and All Might smiled at him and asked him to relax. Izuku looked at the nurse, and she smiled at him. It made him feel a little better. He was used to the creepy doctor that worked for his dad. She asked his permission before she did anything, which made him feel better. She drew some vital fluid from him and gave him a couple of shots. When she was done, she reached in her pocket and gave him some candy, which made him really happy. She looked over to All Might and said she was all done. All Might asked him to follow them, so he got out of bed and followed them. There were more people in the living room, and All Might introduced him to all of them. They gave me nice clothing and toys for him to play with. After about an hour, they left, leaving Izuku and All Might alone again. All Might asked if Izuku wanted to watch some TV with him. Before they realized that days turned into weeks, which turned into months. All Might would leave for work, and one of the professors from UA would come and teach Izuku. When All Might would return, he would train Izuku on different martial arts, then eat together. After a year of them living together, All Might truly loved Izuku. So before he went home, he stopped over at the court and brought home adoption papers. After their daily routine, All Might asked Izuku if he wanted to be his son. Izuku's eyes got huge as he began to cry, and he said yes. After they finished the paperwork, it was official. He was now Izuku Yagi. All of this was done in secret, so that they could keep AFO off Izuku's trail. All Might would occasionally take Izuku out with him, but he knew this was dangerous. But he felt bad that Izuku was always in the house. Izuku never complained, but All Might knew that he also needed a bigger social circle than him and the professors. Izuku loved going into town, playing in the park. Even when All Might wasn't in costume, he always drew a crowd. There were a couple of times when one of AFO minions saw them and tried to take Izuku. All Might stopped them easily, but it always made him very nervous. One day, Izuku asked All Might why were these people trying to take him. All Might asked him to come over and sit down. Then All Might explained everything to him, and all Izuku said was this was all his fault again. All Might placed his hand on Izuku's little shoulder and said none of this was his fault. Dr. Shigaraki entered AFO office and gave him the update on the search for his son. AFO looked at the doctor and said, "My patience is starting to wear thin. Who knows what nonsense All Might is filling his head with?" The doctor simply said that they are up against All Might himself. They knew that this wasn't going to be easy. But they were almost successful a couple of times. They just needed a little more patience. AFO looked at the doctor and sighed, "You're right. At least as the child grows older, the stronger his quirk gets. Maybe this is for the best I can get his quirk when he has matured." AFO looked at the doctor and said, "I have a better idea. Instead of trying to take the child, attack him, don't kill him. Hurt him, just force him to use his quirk, make him stronger." The doctor said, "Wise idea. This will kill two birds with one stone, keeping him isolated and forcing him to become stronger." At All Might's house, Izuku was training with All Might, practicing his martial skills. When All Might said, "You've gotten really good with your martial skill, you need to practice with your quirk. Why haven't you even tried to use it once over this past year?" Izuku answered him by saying, "My mom told me that I had to hide it from my dad." All Might smiled and said, "We need to train your quirk so you could be well-rounded." Izuku asked if he was sure that this was safe. All Might placed his hat on Izuku's shoulder like he always did and said, "Son, the only way for you to truly be able to defend yourself is to bring all of you power to the table and to know how to use it in true combat." All Might said, "We know what your quirk is. Now it's time for you to learn how to properly use it. Let's get started on training your quirk." As the days flew by, Izuku learned how to make a defensive shield. Then he learned how to disappear by bending the light around him. All Might was amazed with how versatile Izuku's quirk was and realized why he had to keep him away from AFO. All Might began adjusting his martial training by making him use the new things he learned in actual fights. All Might would have Izuku disappear during a fight. All Might would flick his nose if Izuku didn't it right. They practiced until Izuku could vanish at will in the middle of a fight. Then All Might began the next step of his training by hitting Izuku's shield at normal strength. Then he started using his real power 3% at first. Then when Izuku was comfortable with that, then All Might started increasing his power by small increments. First 5%, then 8%, all the way up to 75%. Then All Might had Recovery Girl come over and start teaching him how to heal the human body. Izuku learned at an astounding rate. The boy loved to learn. One day, All Might returned home from work and found Izuku preparing their dinner. Izuku turned to look at his father and disappeared. All Might went, still listening for any sound, and in a blink he was in front of Izuku, flicking where his nose should be. "Ouch!" exclaimed Izuku with his hand on his forehead. "What gave me away?" All Might chuckled, "Your footsteps, but other than that it was perfect. One question, son, why didn't you have a shield up?" Izuku thought about that and gave an honest answer, "I didn't think about that." All Might smiled at his son and told him that he needed to start using that brain of his and to change his clothing. It was time to start training. After training, while eating dinner, Izuku looked at All Might and asked, "Dad, why haven't we started training me how to use my quirk offensively yet? Don't get me wrong, I can see all of the advancements we have made, but you can't always win fights defensively." All Might looked at his son and smiled, "Son, first and foremost, I want you to be able to defend yourself." Then All Might followed with, "I wish my power was as flexible as yours. I'm only good at smashing through my problems. But you, my son, you're going to be able to smash through yours, and so much more stealth, healing, defense, and of course fighting through." Izuku looked at his father in awe. He thought his father was perfect. But here he is saying that he wished he had his quirk. Izuku didn't know what to say. He just looked down at his hands. All Might looked at his son and asked what was wrong. Izuku looked at him and asked, "Is this why my mother died?" All Might got up and walked up to Izuku and kneeled down to look him in his eyes and said, "Your mother died to save the most precious person in her life." Izuku began to sob. It's been almost 2 years, and he could still see it all clearly. All Might pulled him into a powerful hug and said, "Thanks to her bravery, I now have a son that I love dearly and would do anything to protect." Izuku went from a sob to a full-on cry, shaking, and replied, "I love you too, Dad." As time passed on, All Might began training with Izuku on how to fight offensively with his quirk. Even now, as a preteen now, Izuku was a force of nature. Relentless with his training, but that wasn't all. He was also relentless with his learning. They both learned the more Izuku understood something, the more he could do it with his quirk. The only thing that seemed to limit Izuku was his knowledge. All Might realized that Izuku needed to spend more time with kids his age. Izuku was becoming more Spartan-like every day. All Might returned home from work one day, and he saw Izuku in the kitchen preparing their dinner, and this time, without turning his head, Izuku just disappeared. All Might froze and listened, then in a blink he was gone. When he flicked his finger, and nothing, he felt a tap at his back. When he turned, Izuku was standing there with a smile. "I got you, Dad." All Might laughed. "Good job. I didn't hear you sneak around me." All Might asked, "What was that sound I heard?" Izuku said, "I use my quirk to shuffle my slippers while I move silently around." "Okay, son, change your clothes. It's time to train." Izuku's shield was now able to withstand All Might's power at 90%. Although Izuku was faster than normal people due to his training, he still wasn't All Might fast. But he was able to hold his own during his training sessions thanks to his quirk. After the training session, when they sat down to relax, All Might looked at Izuku and asked, "Would you like me to enroll you in a regular school?" Izuku's eyes went wide. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Inside, he desperately wanted to be with other kids his age. All Might smiled and said, "I do. You have improved greatly, and I know you can defend yourself against most opponents." All Might reached in his pocket and pulled out a necklace made for men with a small pendant. Izuku looked at the pendant and liked the green jewel in its center. All Might told Izuku that if he was in any real danger, to push in the jewel, and it would send an emergency signal to all the pro heroes in the area and directly to my cell phone with a built-in GPS system. Izuku smiled and asked, "Isn't that a overkill, Dad?" All Might said, "I enrolled you Nyanbashi Junior High School. It's a good school. It's a mixed school, so it has boys and girls." Izuku smiled and was excited to finally be around kids his age. All Might smiled, but was very concerned for Izuku. All Might knew how far AFO would go to get what he wants. He also knew how powerful Izuku was, and thanks to his training, Izuku could take down most pro heroes. Izuku would be able to take down most villains quickly and with minimal collateral damage. All Might just hoped that he would be able to make friends his age. All Might told Izuku that he was going to take him school shopping tomorrow, but for now, let's relax and watch some TV. Izuku was very nervous his first day of school. This was the first time since he started living with All Might that he was going to normal school. He was homeschooled by the professors of UA since he was 4 years old. As he walked to his class, he saw the students chatting with their fiends. He found his seat number and sat down. He looked around, not sure what to expect, when a loud kid walked in talking about the latest All Might fight. How he single-handedly fought 5 villains and saved 20 people in the bank while stopping a robbery. Izuku never heard people speaking about his father this way before. It made him feel proud to be All Might's son, but his dad told him he couldn't tell anyone that he was his son for safety reasons. If they asked Izuku what his father did, he was a high manager Mitsubishi company, and that he lost his mother when he was a child. When the homeroom teacher walked in, he had all of the students introduce themselves. The loud kid Katsuki Bakugo introduced himself in the most arrogant way Izuku has ever heard. He called the rest of the class extras who weren't worthy of his time. Bakugo claimed that he will be the greatest hero once he graduated from UA, the most prestigious hero college. Izuku couldn't help himself. He began to chuckle, which drew Bakugo's ire. Bakugo looked at Izuku and said, "Where do you come from? I've never seen you before." Izuku said, "I was homeschooled, and my father thought it would be good for me to be around kids my age." Bakugo looked at Izuku and said, "Your dad was probably tired of keeping a loser like you at home and wanted you to see what a real winner looks like." Izuku was at a loss for words. He didn't understand why this kid was being so mean to him, and he didn't realize he was clenching his fists. Bakugo didn't miss it and told Izuku, "Oh, you think you're tough guy. If you think you're that tough, I will beat the truth into you." When Izuku was about to reply, the homeroom teacher took control of the class and got the day started. Izuku found his classes to be easy compared to what the UA professors were teaching him. At the end of the day, Izuku warped the light around him and vanished as to not have any issues with Bakugo. When he got home, he changed into his training clothing and began practicing his fighting techniques. When All Might got home and didn't find Izuku in the kitchen preparing their meals like he normally did, All Might went to their home gym, and he saw Izuku working out sweating like he had been at it for hours. All Might called out to him, "Son, are you alright?" Izuku stopped what he was doing and lowered his head and asked in a soft voice, "Am I a loser, Dad? Did you send me to school so I could see how the other kids are better than me?" All Might grabbed Izuku and pulled him into a hug, careful to not accidentally crack his ribs. He could feel Izuku begin to sob as All Might said, "Son, I'm so very proud of you. Where would you get a silly idea like that in your head?" Izuku told him how his day went, and All Might told him that the kid that told him that was a bully and to try to not let him bother him. Izuku told his dad that he was so mad that he didn't even realize that he was clenching his fists. All Might looked at Izuku and said, "Son, you have been trained to fight in a way that most won't be able to compete against. Try to avoid a fight at all costs if you have to fight. Just be careful. People tend to fear people that are that much stronger than they are." Izuku looked his dad in his eyes and asked, "Why aren't people scared of you?" As All Might looked into his son's earnest eyes, he said, "Villains are scared of me, son, and yes, they are people too. But other than that, the only reason regular people aren't scared of me is because I'm a hero." As Izuku thought more about what his dad said, the more he realized that he wanted to go down the hero route as well. Izuku strengthened his resolve and said then, "I want to become a hero also." All Might didn't laugh or smile and asked, "Are you sure, son, this isn't an easy life and I'll have to be harder on you during training?" Izuku's eyes widened. "You going to make my training harder? That I thought you were being hard on me already." All Might laughed this time. "Oh no, son. Just because I made sure your shield could take a couple of my punches doesn't mean that I was hard on you. But don't worry, we'll work on that starting tomorrow." As they days passed, Izuku was getting adjusted to school life, and his father was true to his words. His training had gotten a lot harder. His dad was a beast in a fight. His movements were like water fluid, overwhelming, hard to stop. All Might even told him that he was still pulling his punches, but he told Izuku that he was improving. As time continued to pass, Bakugo kept trying to draw Izuku into a fight with him. Izuku felt the progress he was making. He was getting stronger, not just physically and mentally, but his quirk was also improving. He was learning how to control more things with his quirk. As the days turned into weeks, turned into months, tragedy struck. A villain saw Izuku going to school. The villain made a phone call when the man on the other side of the phone replied, "This is Dr. Shigaraki." The doctor listened to the man and said, "Find out what class the child is and I'll talk to the boss. Do not fail him. Remember what happened to the last two that failed him." The doctor hung up the phone and began walking to AFO office. This time he didn't even bother knocking. He just walked in. The doctor waited for AFO to acknowledge him before he spoke and said, "Master, we finally found your son. He is attending Nyanbashi Junior High School. When would you like for us to go get him?" Izuku started making friends after his 3rd month in school. Being homeschooled made him a bit shy, on top of him accidentally pissing off Bakugo on the first day. Today, while they were taking their English test, the door burst wide open. A villain with a bullet quirk. He looked into the classroom, and as soon as he locked eyes with Izuku, he raised his hands and began to open fire. Izuku already had begun moving while the villain was raising his arms. Izuku placed a barrier between the villain and his classmates while jumping out of his chair, rushing the villain. Bakugo was a second behind Izuku, but Izuku was faster than Bakugo, and a second was all he needed. The villain was surprised when his bullets deflected right in front of him. The villain was surprised when he didn't even manage to hurt any of the students. Izuku grabbed the villain and punched him in the throat. When the villain raised his hand to grab his throat, Izuku punched him in just under his ribs and followed it up with a punch straight to his temple. The villain crumpled. Izuku heard footsteps behind and used his quirk to make them vanish. Bakugo was looking out into the hallway, trying to find him and the villain. Izuku reached into his shirt and pulled out his pendant and pushed the button. Izuku heard the teacher yell at Bakugo, "Is Izuku out there? If not, close the door." Bakugo closed the door when the whole building began to shake, and all of a sudden, he heard an explosion in the classroom, released his quirk, and ran back into the room. When he saw the wall was just gone, the students were hiding behind the teacher. Bakugo was laying on the floor, unconscious. 3 more villains were entering the classroom, and when they saw him, one shouted there, "He is the master, will reward us well if we bring him to him." Izuku placed himself in between the villains and the students. He shouted out, "Leave the others out of this, and I won't go too rough on you." The villains laughed. "Boy, what do you think you could do to stop us?" A woman with whips for hair cracked one at Izuku, and once it entered his field, he stopped it with his quirk. He grabbed it and pulled hard. Once the woman was in his field, he pulled again, and she flew to him thanks to his quirk. He punched her in the gut, and then gave her an uppercut like a pro boxer, knocking her out. The other villain stood in shock. This middle school kid knocked her out like a pro. One of the other villains yelled to Izuku, "Boy, if you don't want your classmates hurt, you will come with us." Izuku looked at the villains and said, "You will not touch any of them. If you don't want to end up like the last 2, you will turn around now or share their fate." The class was in awe of how shy, quiet Izuku beat up 2 adults in a fight. He was nothing like the person they knew. They began to wonder who he really was. He didn't shy away, like when Bakugo tried to get him to fight him, and he beat the woman that knocked out Bakugo easily, placing himself in danger to protect them. One of the villains yelled and charged Izuku and was taken down in a flurry of punches. Then there was a loud crashing sound outside. Izuku looked past the last villain, and what he saw made his heart boil. In anger, the man that had his mother killed was there, his real father, looking at him. All for one, AFO looked at him and smiled and spoke in a smooth voice. "You have grown since I last saw you. It is time for you to come with me, or I will crush this entire school, killing everyone." Izuku turned his head slightly behind him to take a look at his class. Someone pulled Bakugo back with the class, and the teacher, standing in front of his students, trying to shield them, and the look of fear in their eyes. Izuku lowered his hands, and AFO smiled and said, "Good boy," when he heard a yell, "Delaware smash." And in a blink of an eye, AFO was gone, and All Might was standing there. In another blink, he was gone. Izuku attacked the last villain, knocking him out, and sprinted out through the broken wall. All Might and AFO were a blur of motion. AFO looked at All Might with so much hatred in his eyes as they fought, and said, "That is my son to do with as I please. You had no right to steal him from me. Do you even know how powerful his quirk is?" All Might felt real anger rise in his chest. "Is that all you can think about? Is his quirk? You had his mother killed right in front of him." AFO said, "She was weak. She brought it upon herself when she ran. His quirk will be mine, and once I have it, you can keep him. That sounds like a great deal to me. What do you think?" For the first time, All Might snapped, hitting AFO with a punch that shattered windows. AFO flew, using some of his quirks to try to cushion the blow. He realized that this fight became very deadly. If he didn't give All Might his full attention, he might not survive. The two charged at each other, throwing punches that shattered concrete and glass in the buildings around them. Izuku looked in horror as his real father fought his adoptive father. The two men doing their best to stop each other. More heroes began to arrive and evacuate the surrounding area, but Izuku wouldn't move. He warped the light around himself, disappearing from view, but he couldn't budge, watching the man he loves, the man that saved him, fight the man that had his mother killed. Then he heard a sound that made his heart drop. All Might took a hit to his ribs, and he heard bones break. All Might coughed up and dropped down on one knee as AFO smiled down on him, knowing how bad he hurt All Might. All Might knew that he had at least 4 shattered ribs and other internal damage. AFO smiled, knowing this fight was now in his favor. Growing in his confidence, AFO looked at All Might and said, "Look how soft you have grown. How can you expect to properly train that boy? I will teach him how to live up to his true potential. Then I will have his quirk." All Might knows that he needs to end this quickly. All Might didn't want it to come down to this, but he knew it was all or nothing. With his injuries, he wouldn't last long. As AFO began walking towards him, he patently waited, listening to AFO monologue. When AFO was well within All Might's striking range, he struck. As he punched with everything he had, he felt AFO ribs break. As AFO began to double over All Might struck again, he felt AFO skull break. AFO crumpled. All Might fell to his knees. I've never hit anyone that hard before. Did I kill him? Izuku saw the pain on All Might face. Izuku allowed himself to be seen. He ran towards All Might. All Might saw Izuku running towards him. He raised a hand to stop him. Izuku froze, then he vanished, and without a sound he ran towards All Might. He whispered into All Might's ear and asked, is he all right? All Might said, I think he crushed 4 of my ribs, and I have other internal damage. Izuku's heart dropped. The man that raised him, that was all but invincible in his eyes, was hurt and hurt badly. Izuku told All Might to grit his teeth and focused. He heard All Might grunt in pain when Izuku used his quirk fix All Might's bones. Izuku knew that this had to hurt as he forced all of the bone fragments back into place and started fusing them back together. Heroes began to surround All Might, forcing Izuku to stand further back, but he stayed close enough to continue to heal All Might. Izuku now had a range of 6 feet in diameter that he could control with his quirk. He stopped his healing when he saw Recovery Girl rushing towards All Might, and he just finished healing his ribs and some internal organs. Then Izuku backed away from the heroes now surrounding All Might and his real father, AFO, reappearing close to his classmates and other students who were now looking at him differently. He could hear them whispering about how he fought and won without hesitation. Izuku knew in his heart that his short time of normalcy was gone. He would never be able to go back to this school. Izuku looked back towards All Might and saw him placed on a stretcher and being placed in an ambulance. Izuku began walking away, fighting the urge to run like he was taught, as to not bring more attention to himself. He ignored the students and the teacher's calls for him to come back. All Might was being placed on a stretcher when he heard Recovery Girl say that AFO was still alive, but just barely. They placed AFO on a stretcher and placed him in a different ambulance and rushed him to a different hospital. He was headed to a maximum security facility, so that way he couldn't escape once he was healed. Once Izuku was outside of the school and away from the school grounds, he began to run, pulling out his cell phone and pressing the number 1 on his speed dial. Dean Nizu, head of the Hero University, answered the call and asked, "Where are you?" Izuku looked around and told him his location. Dean Nizu said Professor Aizawa was going to be there in 10 minutes and that he was going to take him to his father. Izuku felt a pressure lift from his chest. His knees went weak and he found a bench to sit on. His nerves began to calm down, and without realizing it, he began to weep. For the first time since he lost his mom, Izuku felt lost. He was afraid. After what felt like hours, a car pulled up. It was Professor Aizawa. When he saw Izuku, he stepped out of the car and said, "All Might is going to be okay." Izuku looked up, and he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "Come, Izuku, let's go see him. I'm sure he wants to see you as badly as you want to see him." AFO was on his way to the maximum facility hospital when his escort was attacked, and then his ambulance was peeled open. Dr. Shigaraki stepped in and told F, "Oh, don't worry, Master, I'll be taking care of you. After you're healed, we'll get revenge on the one responsible for this. We will make All Might suffer." Professor Aizawa pulled up to the hospital, and he and Izuku went to the waiting room. There he saw Dean Nizu, Recovery Girl, Professors Midnight, and Present Mike. Midnight was the first to see Izuku, and she went to him and wrapped him in a tight hug. Once again, he began to cry. These are the people that helped raise him, taught him, and trained him. He felt safe again. Recovery Girl walked up to Izuku and wiped the tears from his eyes and told him that his father was going to be fine. That his father was lucky that someone healed the worst of the damage before it was irreversible. She smiled at him and asked aloud, "I wonder who could have healed him without being seen." "Izuku, I wish you would rethink your path. You could become one of the best healers with more training. You could save more lives healing than you could throwing a punch. Please rethink your options. You would still be a great hero. You have a gift." Izuku looked her in the eyes and said, "My father told me that he wished that his quirk was as versatile as mine. I want to honor him by walking down the same path he did and becoming the number 1 hero. I want him to be able to retire and relax, knowing that everything is going to be all right because I am here." Just then the doctor walked in and said that the surgery was done and that All Might was in his room. They followed the doctor to All Might's room. The security just to get to him was unreal. As Izuku entered the room, he saw All Might sitting down and bandaged up. He ran to his father and hugged him. All Might hugged him back and said, "Thank you." Izuku was stunned. He looked at his father and asked, "Why are you thanking me? You wouldn't have gotten hurt if AFO didn't attack my school to get to me." All Might smiled at him and placed his hand on Izuku's head and said, "First of all, you did what you were supposed to do. You pressed the button on your pendant. That saved lives. I was able to get there before he could do any real damage. Second, you stopped when I raised my hand. It stopped you from being linked with me in public. Third, you were able to heal me without being seen, and without that healing, I wouldn't be able to sit here with you right now. Your healing is the only reason why the surgery was a success. If not, I would have been in no condition to do any hero work for a long time." Izuku looked at his father and smiled with tears streaming down his face and said, "I'm just happy that you're all right." Recovery Girl looked at All Might and said, "I want you to talk to Izuku and have him reconsider his path. With a few more years of training, he could be one of the world's greatest healers. Talk to him. He listens to you. Think about all the lives he could save." All Might looked at Recovery Girl and smiled. "My son has chosen his path, and I will train him with all of my might to be an even better hero than me. But I'm going to need all of your help as well. His quirk is a lot more versatile than mine, and I plan on training him to be just as versatile. The more he knows about how things work, the more he can do with his quirk. His only limits are his range and his knowledge." Professor Aizawa looked at All Might and said, "What are you saying, All Might?" All Might smiled and said Izuku's only limits are his range, and if he knows how something works, he could make it happen in his sphere of influence with his quirk. I have been training him on how to be versatile, like making a shield, turning invisible, and making fog, for examples. Recovery Girl has been teaching him healing, but he can do so much more." All Might said Izuku disappear, and without thinking, Izuku vanished. Then All Might said Izuku create fog, and in seconds a room was filled with fog. All Might smiled and said, "Okay, Izuku, get rid of the fog." And in seconds the fog was pulled into a ball and vanished, and Izuku reappeared. Dean Nizu looked at Izuku in a new light and said, "I knew he would be strong, but I didn't think he was that versatile." Dean Nizu said that we will resume teaching him again, and this time we'll be doing more than combat training. The dean looked at Izuku and said, "When you graduate high school, you will attend UA University. Do we have a deal, young man?" Izuku's eyes looked like they were going to pop out of his head. Not only was he going to get specialized training from UA professors, he was guaranteed entry into UA, where his father went for his hero certification. Izuku looked at the dean and said, "I will do my best and work hard to make all of you proud of me." All Might's cell phone starts to ring, and when he answers, his face grew cold. Izuku asked, "Is everything all right?" All Might said no, that AFO was freed by some villains and now is missing. "Izuku, I want to take the next 2 weeks off. Enjoy it. I don't think that anyone is going to be foolish enough to try anything. After these 2 weeks are over, I'm going to focus on your training while the professors focus on your studies." Before Izuku could say anything, Dean Nizu spoke, agreeing with All Might. The professors didn't agree with All Might, but they didn't say anything. Izuku had proven how capable he was along with how responsible he was. Izuku looked at his dad and asked, "Are you sure this is a good idea? They just try to capture me in front of my entire school." All Might said, "We just hurt their boss. They won't dare try anything without his permission. He isn't a forgiving person if something was to go wrong." Dr. Shigaraki finished his second round of surgeries. He wasn't able to save AFO's eyes. The damage was too much. One of his lungs was turned into pulp, completely beyond repair, and the other one was partially collapsed. He will need to be placed on a respirator. He knew he had a lot of work ahead of him, but he needed a rest for a couple of hours so that he could begin again. He gave orders to leave the boy and All Might alone until the boss was ready to deal with them. Anyone caught disobeying those orders would be severely punished. He dozed off, thinking about all of the work he had ahead of him. All Might got his letter of release from a hospital, and they left. They rode with Professor Aizawa. Once he dropped them off at All Might's house, the two went inside and sat on the sofa in front of the TV. They were both quiet for a while before All Might spoke, asking if Izuku was all right. Izuku spoke in a soft voice and said, "No, I'm not. All right, I was scared today. No, not scared. I was terrified. I thought I was going to lose you. I thought I was going to be left all alone. I don't think I can handle that." All Might spoke as gently as he could and said that this is the world that you want to join. Just because you're a hero doesn't guarantee that you're going to win the fight. Death is something that you're going to have to face every day when you wear the costume. Today you got to see that firsthand. I'm going to ask you again, are you sure that this is the path you want to take? It's not too late for you to change your mind. You can live a normal life. You have plenty of options. I want you to take these 2 weeks and live like a normal child. No combat training. Enjoy being around kids your age at the park after they're done with school. Then give me your answer. Izuku went out for a walk, was walking through a park. He looked at the moms playing with their children. Izuku began to wonder what his life would have been like if his mother didn't die. Would he be like the rest of those kids playing, or would his father taken his quirk and left him shell of a child? He kept walking, looking at the children with their moms. As he left the park, wondering how different would his life be if All Might hadn't saved him. Izuku walked by a mall and decided to go inside. Izuku went up to the second floor to the arcade and began playing Mortal Kombat. He remembered a couple of his classmates talking about this game. Izuku didn't realize how much time had passed when he left the mall. He was hungry and walked into a cafe just up the street. He was taken aback. The girls were dressed up as different cats. Before he could leave, a cute girl dressed like an orange tabby cat grabbed his arm and escorted him to a table. Izuku really enjoyed his first visit to this cafe and thought about bringing All Might. When Izuku returned home, he noticed his father talking with Professor Aizawa. All Might smiled when he saw him and asked how was his first real day out by himself. Izuku told him everything, even when he was feeling down. He and his father have never hidden anything from each other and didn't want to start now. All Might listened. He didn't interrupt. He began to smile when Izuku told him about the cat cafe. Professor Aizawa smiled. He really liked that cafe. They have the best desserts in town. When Izuku finished, All Might smiled and said, "I'm glad that you enjoyed yourself. Go change so we can watch a movie." Izuku smiled and left the room. Professor Aizawa looked at All Might and asked him again, "Are you sure it's wise to just let him roam the streets?" All Might looked at his friend and said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." All Might sighed and then said, "If I don't give him the chance to have some unsupervised fun and to see that there is more to this world than capes and villains." Izuku will never really relax enough to learn to enjoy life with normal people. He already blames himself for his mother's death and me getting hurt. I just want him to learn how to have fun, to be a child. Professor Aizawa looked at All Might in a different light. He thought he was being reckless, but he was giving the child a chance to be normal. As Izuku entered the room, Professor Aizawa was saying goodbye. Izuku asked, "Was everything all right?" All Might told him the truth, that the professors just wanted to make sure that Izuku was safe being unsupervised. All Might and Izuku had based their entire relationship on being honest with each other. It kept everything simple. Izuku looked at his dad and thanked him for letting him have this time. For the first time, he felt normal. Izuku asked his father when his 2 weeks was over, would he be able to do this again? All Might smiled at his son and said yes on weekends, but during the weekdays he was going to focus on school and training. The two sat down to watch a movie, and halfway through the movie, All Might's phone rang, and when he answered, he said, "I'll be right there." He looked at Izuku and said, "Work calls, I'll be back as soon as I can." And in a flash, he was gone. Izuku got up and shut off the movie and went to his room. The 2 weeks flew, and his training began. All Might wasn't kidding when he said training was going to be hard. The UA professors made all of the arrangements. He was being homeschooled, but he was going to receive a normal high school diploma. Izuku began looking forward to the weekends. He really enjoyed the maid cafe. There were a lot of cute girls that worked there. Some even flirted with him. He enjoyed going for walks in the park. There was a tree that he enjoyed resting against as he watched the moms watching over their kids in the park. He liked to imagine his mom playing with him at a park. Sometimes he would read a book while relaxing by that tree. Between the school and training, he really looked forward to his weekends. He didn't have any real friends. He would say hi to some of the kids that he would play with. But after what happened at school, he didn't let the other kids get too close. It hurt him to see them look at him that way. The fear before he fought and the whispers when he won and walked away. Izuku didn't want anyone else going through that because of him. He promised himself that he would be strong enough to protect the people he cared for. So before he could do that, he must train so that he could be strong enough for his dad to retire in peace. Once Izuku asked All Might why was he still doing hero work, All Might could retire, and enjoy the rest of his life with how much money he made of his merchandise, sponsorships, and endorsements. All Might could live a life of luxury for the rest of his life and never worry. All Might looked him in the eyes and said, "I've never done this for the money, but as long as there are people calling out to me for help and my body is able, I will be there for them." Izuku learned that day why a real hero does what he does. Not for the money, but for the chance to make a real difference for the people that they serve. Izuku wanted to be just like his dad, so he pushed himself mentally and physically. 5 years passed, and Izuku finally graduated high school. Izuku woke up excited today. He was going to watch the students' entrance exams with All Might. Izuku took his test earlier against the other recommended students and took the top score. When Izuku entered the monitor center, Professor Midnight squealed in delight as she pulled Izuku into her chest. All Might walked in asking her to let the boy breath. When she let him go, Izuku was a deep crimson. She smiled at him and said, "You're still not used to a woman's affection," and said, "Don't worry, I'll teach you more now that you're legal." Izuku felt the blush go down his neck and sat down behind his father. Dean Izu walked in and congratulated Izuku on taking highest score on the recommended exams. Then all of the monitors came to life, and Izuku saw the students wishing to enter the hero course at UA. It was just by chance that he saw a girl that he recognized. She worked at the Cat Cafe, the one he liked to go during the weekends. She was always nice to him. She even asked him for his number. Achiko Uraraka was her name. Izuku told her that he didn't have a phone, and she let it go, but she was always happy to see him. Izuku told Midnight that he knew that girl, and she began to tease him when the exam started. When Izuku began looking at other monitors, he saw different exam fields, and then he saw someone else. The new Bakugo was also taking the exam. Izuku watched with monitor with Achiko on it. He was rooting for her. Achiko was doing well until Dean Nizu hit the big red button and huge robot started rolling down the street she was on. A large piece of building collapsed and fell to the street. When the dust cleared, Achiko's leg was trapped, and she was in pain as the robot got closer and everybody was running in the opposite direction. Izuku spoke with panic in his voice. "Why isn't anyone helping her?" Professor Midnight asked, "What are you going to do about it?" Without a second thought, Izuku used his quirk, lifting the ground that he stood on up, quickly floating forward. He used his quirk to turn the 6-inch thick ballistic glass into sand and shot out of the room like a bullet. All Might turned to Midnight and said, "You had to provoke him, didn't you?" Dean Nizu smiled as he watched the monitor tracking Izuku. One of the heroes asked why did he take a chunk of the floor with him. All Might replied with, "He can't fly, but he could use his quirk to make the ground under him do what he wants. I'm just glad that he didn't destroy the whole room just to get out," All Might said. Achiko saw the robot reaching out to grab. She yelled out for help one last time and tried to cover her head with her hands to try to protect herself when she heard metal begin to crunch. When she looked up, she couldn't believe her eyes. The boy from the cafe was floating just above her, and the robot's hand was crushed for the first time she saw him angry. The robot backed up and deployed its weapon systems and targeted Izuku. Izuku used his quirk to lift the wall off Achiko's leg and lifted her with his quirk and placed her behind him. Achiko was still in shock when the robot's hand crumpled in on itself just before it touched Izuku. Now, the wall lifted off her leg, and she was lifted into the air behind him. He didn't even look back at her. He was focused on the robot, which had weapons pointed at them now. Achiko barely heard him say, "It's going to be okay," as they both launched into the air like they were fired through a cannon right at the robot. Izuku was focused. This was the most he ever multitasked while using his quirk. Once again, he focused gravity into a point in front of him as they blasted towards the robot. All of the students were now staring at the pair fly towards the robot and into it, making a hole in its chest and blasting out its back. The gravity point did its job of crushing its circuitry as they flew through the robot, powering it down. Izuku began to turning towards Achiko, slowly asking her if she was all right. Achiko said, "I think my leg is broken." Then she began drifting towards Izuku. Izuku cradled her in his arms so that he could carry her, and he was surprised when she wrapped her arms around his neck. When they touched the ground, Izuku released his quirk, and the students began to surround them. Recovery Girl was walking down the street when she saw Izuku carrying a girl in his arms. She wondered why he didn't heal her himself, but she didn't say anything. She walked up to Izuku, checking Achiko's leg, and asked Izuku to follow her to the recovery room so she could treat the girl. Then she began checking the rest of the students. The strain of using his quirk so much had Izuku tired, but he continued to carry Achiko, following Recovery Girl. Achiko apologized to Izuku for having to carry her, but he just smiled at her and said it wasn't a problem. Achiko said, "I don't remember seeing you at the beginning of the exam." Izuku calmly said, "Because I wasn't there, I've been recommended, and I was able to see the exam because of a favor. I saw you in trouble, and I couldn't let that robot hurt you. Besides, who else would take such good care of me at the cafe?" Achiko blushed. Thankfully, he wasn't looking at her, or she would have turned into a puddle of goo. When they arrived at Recovery Girl's office, he gently placed her on the treatment bed. Izuku stepped away to let Recovery Girl check Achiko's leg. Recovery Girl smiled and said, "Izuku, you can leave now." Izuku blushed at being called out when All Might walked in. Achiko went into fangirl mode. All Might said, "There you are, Izuku. How's the girl? And are you ready to go?" Recovery Girl said she was going to be okay. "So I guess I'm ready," he said. Izuku looked over to Achiko and said, "I hope I get to see you soon," and they left the room. When they entered the hallway, they both heard Achiko scream out, "That was All Might." As All Might and Izuku walked down the hallway, All Might said that the dean was very impressed with how you handled the rescue. You shielded her with your body and quirk, which was smart. Then you kept her directly behind you when you attacked. What I want to know is why you took her when you were attacking the robot. Izuku said that environment was unstable. I didn't want anything to fall on her when she was out of range of my quirk. So the safest place for her to be was right behind me. All Might smiled at his son and said that was very well thought out. Indeed, it was Dean Nizu said as he joined them walking down a different part of the hallway. "You've improved with your multitasking, and I'm grateful that you turned the glass into sand instead of shattering it," Dean Nizu said. "Izuku, when the semester starts, you will be placed in Class 1. Hey, I'm expecting great things from you," the dean said before entering an office. Izuku looked at his dad and said, "No pressure." All Might smiled at his son and said, "You'll be fine. The dean sees great potential in you, plus you have been training with professors." Izuku smiled and said, "Do you mind if I go to the cafe tomorrow?" All Might smiled at him, saying that he could go, but the girl may not be there. Izuku blushed and said, "Dad, she isn't the only reason I go there. They have the best desserts. Would you like to join me?" All Might said, "I have to take a rain check this weekend. I'm on patrol. How about next weekend I'll join you?" "Deal," Izuku said. As they went home, Izuku sat on the couch and dozed off. The next morning, Izuku got up and left for the cafe after his morning workout. While he was on his way to the cafe, he saw a little girl being attacked by a slime villain. Before Izuku could do anything, the girl's older sister pushed her out of the way. The slime villain grabbed the older girl, and she screamed while being engulfed by the slime. Something in Izuku snapped. All he could see was his mother holding him. He ran towards them as the crowd was running away, calling for help. Once they were in range of his quirk, Izuku used it to pull the girl out of the slime villain. She flew towards him. Izuku placed her by her little sister, and he faced the slime villain, who looked at him in shock. Izuku yelled, "You like picking on girls? Let me show you why you'll never do that in front of me." The slime felt himself being compressed. He couldn't move, and the boy was walking towards him calmly. He could see the anger in the boy's eyes, and now he was being lifted into the air. The boy had to be telekinetic, but they couldn't hold slime. He could always get away. He tried to squirm, but it was like he was locked in place. Izuku found what he was looking for. He grabbed a large soda bottle someone dropped. He calmly opened it and poured out the soda. He pointed the bottle towards the slime and used his quirk to force the slime into the bottle and screwed the cap on. Once he was done, he placed the bottle on the ground and turned to check on the girls. The big sister was holding her little sister, and both were crying. Izuku went over to them and checked to see if they were okay. The crowd exploded with cheers. The pro hero Death Arms showed up to a cheering crowd, recording a boy consoling two girls. The fight was over, and there was a soda bottle in the middle of the street. Izuku was talking with the girls. He found out the older of the two is Azui, and her sister's name is Satsuki Azui. The little girl was hugging him, crying, thanking him for saving her sister. Izuku hugged the little girl back, telling her that everything is all right now. Izuku told Tsuyu that he was impressed with her, how she threw herself in harm's way to save her sister. Tsuyu blushed. She asked her sister to please let him go, then she stopped and asked him for his name. Satsuki finally let him go, and he looked Satsuki in the eyes and smiled. She began to blush and answered to my name is Izuku. Tsuyu said, look, Death Arms is here. When she looked back to where Izuku was, he was gone. Satsuki gasped. Where did he go? He was just here when Death Arms walked up to them and asked what happened here and where did the boy go. Izuku barely made it halfway home, using his quirk to vanish when his cell phone started to ring, and it was All Might. When Izuku answered his phone, the first question All Might's asked was, are you all right? Izuku was stunned that his father found out what happened so quickly. Izuku said, I'm fine, I wasn't hurt, but how did you find out so quickly I was going to call you when I got home? All Might said that the incident was all over social media and the news. They're all talking about the mysterious boy that saved the girl, then vanished in a thin air after giving her his name. There's also video footage of the fight. Izuku felt his heart drop. He knows that he needs to be licensed to use his quirk to save people. All Might asked Izuku what was he thinking. Izuku answered, saying that when he saw the girl pushing her sister to safely, all he could see was his mom trying to save him. Dad, think that I need to speak to a therapist, someone not associated with UA. All Might felt a lump in his throat and said, okay, then asked what are you going to do now? Izuku said, I'm going to turn myself in to the police. You taught me to do what is right, not what is easy. I love you, Dad, and I'll call you when they give me my phone call. Then Izuku hung up the phone and went to the closest police station and turned himself in. Dr. Shigaraki walked into AFO treatment room and said, Master, your son has been located. He was on the news. He rescued a girl from a guy with a slime quirk. AFO spoke through his respirator, leave him be for now. I've been preparing a wonderful surprise for him, and All Might, let's see how they deal with my adopted son. My body still isn't ready just yet, but soon I will be ready. All Might beat me last time because I let my guard down. I won't make the same mistake twice. Mom, you need to see this, Achiko said excitedly. This is the boy that saved me during my exam at UA. He's on the news. He saved a girl and her sister from a villain that attacked them not too far from where I work. Achiko's mom quickly walked into the living room to see the boy that her daughter couldn't stop talking about looks like. Achiko said, I hope that he doesn't get into trouble for this. Her mom said, the law says only licensed heroes can use their quirks to save people. Achiko frowned and said, Mom, he is such a nice guy. He's humble, kind, shy, and bashful. I hope that this doesn't ruin his chance to get into UA. He made it in by recommendation. A news flash popped up on TV saying that the boy that rescued the girls turned himself into authorities and a police representative spoke. The boy that broke the law by using his quirk to rescue a girl and captured the slime villain is being released. He agreed to complete 2 weeks of community service instead of going to court. The boy's father has been notified and also agreed with the punishment. Tsuyu watched the news announcement and began crying after the announcement was made when her dad walked in from work. Tsuyu, what is wrong? Why are you crying? Her mom was sitting with her and said, we were waiting for you to come home to tell you. Tu and Satsuki were attacked today, and the boy that saved them turned himself into the police and now has to serve 2 weeks of community service because he used his quirk to save them. Are you okay? Were you hurt? Where's Satsuki? Is she okay? You should have called me, your dad said. Tsuyu said that they were both fine. It all happened so quickly, I never even got to thank him. Gamma sat down next to his daughter and asked why her crying. Tsuyu said that she felt guilty for him getting in trouble after he was so kind to her and her little sister. Gamma said, I'm going to call the police station and see what I could do to help that boy. Satsuki walked into the room, and when she saw her dad, she yelled out, Daddy, and ran towards him, jumping into his arms, and said, you'll never believe what happened to us today. Just then Tsuyu's mom's phone began to ring. She answered. This is Baru Azui. The voice on the other side sounded very familiar, but she couldn't place it. Hello, my name is Tashinori Yagi. You were recommended to me by a mutual friend to help my son. He wants to talk with a therapist to resolve some of his past issues. Can you help us? Baru looked at her daughter and said, I wasn't planning on taking any new clients, but you caught me at the right time. I'll help. I'll be in touch with you to get him on my calendar. Is this a good number to call you? Baru asked. All Might said yes, and thank you, and hung up. Baru said that she would love to meet this boy and thank him personally. Izuku was standing in front of the door in front of his house, and for the first time in his life was hesitant to walk in. He took a deep breath and walked in. He thought that his dad was going to yell at him, or worse, he was going to tell him how disappointed he was. Izuku thought the second one would be worse. When he entered the room, he felt himself being lifted up in a strong embrace. His dad said, "I'm glad that you weren't hurt. I'm very proud of you." Izuku was shocked. This wasn't what he was expecting. All Might said, "You did what you thought was right, then you faced the repercussions of your actions without being asked to." When All Might put Izuku down, he saw that they weren't alone. Dean Nizu was there. Dean Nizu said, "I want you to know we didn't call the police to make things easier for you. We waited until they released you to find out about the community service, and they were being flooded with phone calls by people outraged that you had been punished for doing what is right. Izuku, I can't publicly condone what you did, but I want you to know we watched all of the footage of you rescuing that girl, and it was hero-grade work. I'm looking forward to what you can do after being properly trained. But for the next 3 weeks, I suggest that you stay out of trouble," Dean Nizu said. "Why 3 weeks? I'm done with community service in 2, Izuku asked. "Because school starts in 3 weeks, or have you forgotten?" his dad asked. "Oh my, look at the time. I have to go," said the dean. "I'll see you at the university." Izuku looked at his dad and said, "I thought you were going to be angry with me. I knew better, and I almost blew my chance at entering UA." All Might simply said, "I raise you to do what is right, not what is easy. You could have walked away, but then it would have eaten at you." Izuku said, "Dad, all I could see was the look in my mom's eyes when she was handing me to you, and I couldn't let that little girl see the same thing." All Might hugged Izuku one last time and said, "I made the arrangement you asked me to. I should be getting a phone call with your appointment here soon." Izuku woke up early the next morning. He had a hard time sleeping. He completed his morning workout, then ate breakfast, then left the house to begin his community service. Izuku went to Takoba Municipal Beach Park to begin cleaning it. When he looked out across the sand, he sighed. He saw years of trash ruining this beach, and he began to work using his quirk. He was collecting and compacting all of the trash. It was almost lunchtime when All Might showed up with a to-go box in his hand. It was from his favorite cafe. Izuku couldn't help but smile. He used his quirk to make 2 seats from some of the scrap metal that was on the beach. All Might sat on one of the chairs and handed Izuku a letter. Izuku looked confused and asked, "Who is it from?" All Might chuckled and said, "You left quite the impression on the girl from the exam. When I walked into the cafe, she ran over to me, asking me, 'Were you okay?' Then she asked me to deliver this note to you." Izuku blushed and said, "Thank you," then asked, "What did you get me?" All Might smiled. "When I said the meal was for you," she said, "Don't worry, I know what his favorite meal and dessert is, and packed it up for you." Izuku's ears began to turn red. He put the letter in his pocket and enjoyed lunch with his dad. When they were done, All Might stood up and said, "You have an appointment with the therapist tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Izuku smiled and said thank you and began where he left off. The rest of the day flew by, and Izuku went home excited to read his letter. The next morning, Izuku was out early cleaning the beach again. He was in a great mood. The letter that Achiko wrote him made him feel like a real hero, and she said she would like to see him again. The morning flew by, and at noon Izuku stopped working and started heading up to the street. As he got to the top of the stairs, his dad pulled up in his car and said, "Are you ready?" Izuku got in the car, and they went to his appointment. When they arrived, All Might asked, "Do you want me to go with you to meet Dr. Azui?" Izuku thought about it and said, "Not this time, but maybe next time. You know how people get when they meet you for the first time." All Might smiled and asked, "Do you want me to pick you up when you're done?" Izuku smiled and said no, and exited the car. "I'll see you at the house," and entered the building. Baru Azui was sitting in her office when her phone rang, letting her know that her appointment arrived. She said to show him in. When the boy entered her office, she was shocked to see it was the same boy that saved her daughter walking in. She said, "It's you." Izuku was surprised by the comment and said, "Excuse me, but do I know you?" "No, you don't know me, but I'm in your debt. I've been wanting to meet you to say thank you for saving my girls," Baru said. She got up from her desk and walked over to Izuku and hugged him. Izuku was at a loss for words. He began to think the girl that he saved from the villain last name was Azui. This is her mom. Izuku hugged Baru back, then stepped back. He said, "I only did what I thought was right, and I'm glad your daughter is safe." Baru went back to her chair and sat down. She asked Izuku to sit, as well she had multiple chairs in her office, and told him to sit in whichever one he wanted. When Izuku sat down, she asked him what was on his mind. When he began to tell her, she felt her heart break. This poor boy saw his mom die right in front of him. His real dad tried to kill his adoptive father right in front of him. Baru listened to this kind boy and wondered how was he still so kind. Izuku was very careful not to mention any names, but he felt the well of pain in his heart lighten. When his time was up, Baru stood up and said, "I would like to have a few more sessions with you if you don't mind." Izuku smiled at he and said he would like that also, that this made him feel better. Before Izuku left, he looked at Baru and said, "Please tell Tsuyu and Satsuki that I'm sorry that I didn't get there sooner. Tell them that I don't regret what I have done. My only regret was not getting there sooner. Could you tell them that for me?" Baru smiled and said, "Tsuyu said that you're a kind person. Your adoptive father must be a kind, strong man to have brought you up with such convictions." Izuku smiled and said that my dad is the strongest, kindest man I know. There was a commotion just outside of the door. When Izuku opened it, he saw his father standing there, the secretary, telling him that she was with a client. "I'm here to pick up young Yagi to ensure that he finishes his community service," All Might said, and they both left without another word. Baru's jaw dropped. All Might was standing there, and she remembered what Izuku said about his dad being the strongest man he knew. Could All Might be his adoptive father? Izuku looked at his father and said, "I thought we agreed that I would meet you at home." All Might said, "I was just concerned with how you were feeling." "You'll always be my boy, and I'll always be concerned for you," All Might said. Izuku smiled and said, "Thank you, Dad, for always being there for me, teaching, caring for me, and making me who I am today." Baru walked into her house and sat down. She was still in shock that she met the boy that saved her daughters and that All Might be his adoptive father. Baru called for Tsuyu and Satsuki to join her in the living room. Baru told them that she ran into the boy that saved them today and then passed his message to them. She didn't want to tell them he was now her patient. "I'm so happy that he isn't mad at us," he said. "He sounded so kind when he was hugging Satsuki, calming her down. He could have just vanished after the fight, but he came over to us just to make sure that we were okay," Tsuyu said. Satsuki looked at her mom and said, "I wish I could see him again. He was really brave and really nice." It took Izuku a week and a half to completely clean the beach. The probation officer said that after that much effort that his community service was officially complete. Izuku went to his favorite cafe to celebrate. He called his father to meet him there. When they entered the cafe, Achiko's face light up. She ran over to Izuku and hugged him. Izuku blushed, and All Might teased him a little. Achiko told him that she was glad that he showed up today because it was her last day of working here. She told him that she was accepted into UA and would be starting in a week. Izuku smiled and said, "That is wonderful." Achiko looked down and asked, "Are you going to be able to attend UA?" Izuku smiled and said, "Yes." Achiko raised her head and smiled, "I hope to see you in school." She sat them down and said, "I'll be back with your drinks." And then she walked away. All Might said that this was the first time in a long time that he felt ignored and chuckled. Izuku blushed when he looked around. He saw everyone was staring at them. All Might said that this is the price of fame. "I'm surprised it took you so long to notice." Achiko was rushed by all of the other waitresses begging her to ask for All Might's autograph. One of them asked her how she met All Might. Then one of the girls said, "Why does the boy with him look so familiar? Isn't that the boy that got in trouble for using his quirk to save that girl? Don't tell me All Might has to follow him around so that he doesn't do it again." Achiko said, "I have to get their drinks, and I'll try to get his autograph for you guys." At the end of their meal, All Might signed a couple of autographs, and Izuku asked if he could get a picture with Achiko, still in her uniform. She blushed before she knew it. She was in between Izuku and All Might when the picture was taken. When the two left, all of the girls rushed Achiko, questioning her about her relationship with that boy. The first day of school Achiko arrived early and found her seat. A boy with blonde hair and lighting design in it began flirting with her. As other students began entering, she saw the girl that Izuku rescued enter the class. Then a loud blonde guy with spiky hair walked in and sat on top of one of the tables, and a tall guy with glasses began to argue with him. Achiko was afraid that he wasn't going to be in her class when he finally walked in. So he got up and walked straight towards Izuku. When he saw her, he smiled. He raised his hand to shake hers when she stepped in and hugged him and said, "I didn't get a thank you." Achiko was stunned. She was even more shocked when he hugged her back, saying, "I'm glad that you're okay." Izuku stepped back and asked, "How's your sister doing?" Achiko got up and walked over to him and hugged him, not out of jealousy, but because she wanted to. Izuku blushed. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. Then he heard a voice he couldn't forget. Katsuki Bakugo yelled, "Hey nerd, did you get lost? Why are you in my class?" Then another voice said, because he scored the highest out of all of the recommended students, Professor Aizawa said, as he walked into the class. "Everyone get into gym clothing. It's time to see who gets to stay in my class and who gets sent home." Achiko let Izuku go and asked him, "Is he joking?" Izuku said, "No, he isn't the type of man to joke around like that." Bakugo changed and looked to see where Izuku went. When he found him, he was surrounded by a few of the guys asking him if he was dating one of those girls. Katsuki felt his anger surge. That was the guy that left his class after the fight and never returned. Izuku supposedly fought 4 villains, and one he even beat the one that beat him. Bakugo wanted to show Izuku that he was better than him, that his loss was a fluke. This test, we're going to prove that Bakugo will be the top student after this test. After all, he was the #1 scoring student at the entrance exam. Professor Aizawa smiled and said the student in last place will be sent home. Bakugo asked, "Can we use our quirks?" The professor said, yes. Katsuki knew he was going to win. After the exam was over, Minoru Mineta finished last. Izuku was in first. Bakugo came in third, and this really angered him. He never placed so low before. He lost to Izuku in the dash, and Izuku was able to lift heavier weights on the bench than he could, and he lost him in the throw. Izuku came in second only in one event. He lost to a girl named Achiko when they threw the ball for distance. She could control gravity, and the ball never landed. This pissed Bakugo off even more because he couldn't figure out Izuku's quirk. Professor Aizawa called the class together and said, "You have impressed me enough. I won't send any of you home." Bakugo said, "I knew you were bluffing." Izuku said, "No, he wasn't. He expelled an entire class once because they didn't meet his standards. If you think I'm joking, look into it." Mineta swallowed hard, thankful that he wasn't sent home. Tsuyu was standing close to Izuku and asked him, how does he know so much about Professor Aizawa? Izuku looked at her and said, "He is like an uncle to me. I've heard lots of stories about students that fail to meet his expectations." Achiko, Bakugo, and a few other students began to stare at Izuku. Bakugo began looking at Izuku in a new perspective. Izuku is very well connected, and if what his old classmates were even close to the truth, Izuku is a very skilled fighter. Then why did Izuku leave his class behind, and why wouldn't Izuku fight when provoked? Bakugo needed to know before he could try to forgive him. Izuku excused himself to change, saying he had an appointment he needed to make, then left. Tsuyu and Achiko watched him leave when a new voice caught their attention. It was a pink girl with horns. Mina Ashido said, "Do you think there's more to him than he is letting off?" Achiko said that he was able to watch the entrance exams, and that's how she met him. "What do you mean?" Tsuyu asked. Achiko told the 2 girls how he rescued her from the giant robot, and how he explained how he was able to watch the exam. Izuku arrived at Dr. Ajui's office for his counseling session. She asked him how he was feeling and how he was connecting with the other students. Once again, his answers broke her heart. Izuku was afraid to connect with people, not because he was antisocial or just like being alone. He was afraid that anyone that got too close to him would get hurt by his real father. Izuku never allowed himself to get close to anyone, especially after the fight between his adoptive father and his real father. He's never had a girlfriend or any real friends his age. She could see the hurt in his eyes when he spoke about this. He told her that he wouldn't allow anyone to get too close to him until he was strong enough to protect them from his past. When she asked about his father, she could see the pride in his eyes. Izuku told her about his father and all of the great teachers that he put in his life. Dr. Ajui asked if he felt comfortable enough to bring his father in for his next session. Izuku smiled and said yes, that he and his father had a very honest relationship and that they never hid anything from each other. As their time came to a close, Izuku rose to leave feeling better. Dr. Ajui asked Izuku if he would like to join them for dinner one day, that her daughters would love to thank him. Izuku smiled at her and said Tsuyu was in his class, and she thanked him. Dr. Ajui said that her other daughter and her husband would love to thank him. Izuku looked a little troubled, and slowly he agreed to dinner. She smiled at him and said, "Be at my house at 7 p.m. Friday." When Izuku got to the door to leave, he turned around and asked if she would like him to bring anything. Dr. Azui said, "Just an appetite." "Izuku, please don't tell my daughter that you're my patient." When Izuku got home, he was surprised to see that his dad was already home. They spoke about his therapy session. He told his dad how she would like him to join them for his next session, and how he was invited to dinner on Friday, and that he accepted the invitation. All Might was surprised that he accepted the invitation. This wasn't the first time he was invited to go to a dinner or a party, but he always smiled and declined the invitations. So Izuku accepting this invitation made All Might happy. Izuku is more warrior than young adult. Izuku needs to learn how to enjoy life. When Baru got home, she told her family that she ran into and invited Izuku over for dinner on Friday. Satsuki smiled and couldn't hide her excitement. Tsuyu looked shocked, and her cheeks began to turn red. Her little brother Samidare saw her blush and did what all little brothers do. He began teasing her. Her dad told him to stop teasing his sister and that he was excited to finally meet the young man that saved his daughters. When Bakugo got home, he logged into his computer trying to find any information about Izuku. What surprised him the most was that there weren't any records of him anywhere, not even at the school they both attended together. He remembered that Izuku said that he was homeschooled. He finally found her records of his high school diploma. Izuku never participated in any sport programs, no clubs after school. Well, loser Bakugo thought aloud Deku sounded like a great name for him. But how did he beat all of the recommended students? It must be a completely different test. The question that really bothered Bakugo was that who would recommend someone like him? No sports, no martial arts background, nothing competitive. Hell, there's nothing academic, setting him apart from everyone else. Bakugo shut down his computer. He now has more questions than what he started with. Maybe he was the son of a politician who was trying to become a hero for political reasons. Bakugo was determined to figure out Izuku's secrets and expose him in front of the class. The first week of school flew by. Izuku was surprised by two things. Firstly, he didn't know as much about heroes as he thought he did. Second, he was so far ahead of the other students, it was almost unfair. When Friday rolled up, Izuku was surprised by his father walking into the classroom in his hero costume. "I'll be in charge of your training today, and it's going to be combat training," All Might said. But first you need to look like heroes." All Might pushed a button, and briefcases slid out of the walls. "Our hero costumes," a tall student with glasses named Tenya Ida said. "That is correct," All Might said with his trademark smile in place. "Now you have 10 minutes to change and meet up at Training Ground Beta." As All Might waited, the students began to arrive, showing off their costumes for the first time. He couldn't wait to see his son in his for the first time. All Might was talking to one of the students when he heard Achiko gasp in surprise. When he looked up, he saw his son, and he couldn't have been more proud. Achiko walked up to him and said, "I barely recognized you." "It looks great on you," Tsuyu said. Izuku blushed and said, "Thanks, it's tighter than I expected. I'm just glad that I don't look silly." Then he got a good look at them and said, "You both look great." Both girls smiled when All Might cleared his throat and began to speak. He explained that this is a team battle and the rules heroes versus villains. The students then drew lots to select their partners and opponents. Achiko and Izuku were on the same hero team, and they were against Bakugo and Ida villains. Bakugo couldn't wait to finally be able to pay back Izuku for abandoning his class. Bakugo told Lita to guard the bomb and that he would handle the other team. When All Might said begin, Achiko used her quirk to lift both of them through a window on the second floor. While they were going over their change strategy, thanks to the open window, Izuku realized his mistake almost too late. He was so caught up with Achiko, he wasn't aware of his surroundings. He grabbed Achiko and jumped to the side as an exploding attack hit them. Bakugo wasn't pulling his punches. He wanted to knock them out, at the least hospitalize them at worst. Achiko saw Izuku's costume was torn and still smoking, but she was untouched by the attack. He protected her with his body. His whole demeanor changed. He was now completely focused like when he fought the giant robot. "Achiko, carry out our plan. I'll join you shortly." Achiko hesitated for a second, then she sprinted down the hall. Izuku looked at Bakugo for the first time and asked him, "What's your problem with me?" You could have hurt Achiko with that attack. Bakugo went from anger to rage. Are you saying that I can't hurt you? Fine, let's put it to the test. Bakugo charged and swinging. Izuku rushed in as well, countering all of his attacks. Bakugo wasn't expecting this. He was in martial arts since he was 10, and he couldn't land a clean shot. That's when he began to cut loose with his explosions, but Izuku was flowing through all of his attacks. Bakugo jumped back and said, "You're great at dodging, try dodging this," and pulled the pin on his gauntlet. Izuku used his quirk and diverted the explosion around himself, and lunged forward, punching Bakugo in the chest and the jaw. Bakugo instinctively raised his hands for the next shot. Izuku hit him just under his ribs, causing him to drop to his knees. The last thing Bakugo heard before he blacked out was, "I'm sorry." Leto was fast. He was moving the bomb around the room so quickly Achiko couldn't keep up when she heard a chime through her earpiece. Izuku asked for her location when she told him she was 3 stories up and they were running low on time. Izuku used his quirk and began going through the floors to save time. He let Achiko know that he was coming up through center of the room to be ready. Leto was sprinting away from Achiko when the center of the room bubbled up, then bursted like a zit with Izuku in the center, yelling now. Achiko jumped towards Izuku. As he extended his hand out, she grabbed it, and he turned and threw her at Lita. Lita was so stunned at how well-timed the attack was that he lost a step, allowing Achiko to grab the bomb with seconds to spare. All Might's voice came over the intercom, shouting, "The heroes win." Izuku reflected on his mistakes as they joined the rest of the class to observe the rest of the trials. He got sloppy because he was paying too much attention to Achiko. Achiko, on the other hand, was very happy that they won. Bakugo was devastated. This was the first time that he has lost a fight since his loss in his freshman year of middle school to a villain. When all the students were in the observation room, All Might asked who did what right and who made mistakes and who was the MVP. A tall girl wearing a ponytail, Momo Yaoyorozu, chastised Bakugo for his massive explosion, destroying a huge chunk of the building and his lack of teamwork. In his heart, Bakugo knew she was right. Then she chastised Izuku for the structural damage from going through the floor, but complimented his teamwork with Achiko. She only faulted Achiko for her lack of forethought before entering the room with the bomb, but complimented her for trusting her partner. Leto won MVP for being able to keep his opponents away from the bomb for as long as he did. All Might was stunned by her insight. This is why he loved training Izuku, because of his keen insight. Now, there was another with the same type of insight. This was going to be an interesting class. Izuku watched closely as the rest of the class completed their trials. He wanted to learn as much about their different fighting styles as he could. Bakugo, on the other hand, watched and learned for the first time that he wasn't the strongest in class. This really disturbed him. He was so used to being the best, and it always came so easy that it was only natural for him to win without really trying. But now he tried hard to win and lost, and what made it worse was that Izuku wasn't the only one that he knew that he couldn't beat. When the testing was complete, Izuku was surrounded by most of the class talking about how crazy his fight was. Eijiro Kirishima asked how did he dodge that massive explosion and close in for his attack so quickly. We didn't get to see it. The explosion blinded the camera. All we saw was you hit him in the jaw and then in his solar plexus. Izuku simply said that as soon as he pulled his pin, I slammed myself against the wall and got lucky. Izuku then excused himself, saying that he has a prior commitment that he needed to attend. Achiko grabbed his arm, and Izuku stopped as she looked into his big green eyes. She asked him if he was seeing anyone. Izuku was stunned by this question. Before he could answer, Momo spoke. Of course he's seeing someone. Someone like him couldn't possibly be single. Izuku began to blush. No, I'm not seeing anyone, to be honest. I've never even had a girlfriend. Everyone froze. Izuku used this moment to slip into the changing room to change, so he could go home and get ready for his dinner with the Azui family. All Might was driving Izuku to the Azui's house. They were talking about the team match. All Might was discussing things he could have done differently and asked him why is he not using his quirk to his fullest potential. Izuku simply stated that he doesn't want his classmates to know what he could really do. He doesn't want them to look at him differently when they find out that he is in a completely different league than they are. All Might understood that fact all too well and reminded him that he can't win every fight alone as they arrived at the house. Izuku said, "I know, Dad. I just don't want them to be afraid of me," when he stepped out of the car. He grabbed the flowers and chocolates that his father insisted that he buy and said, "I'll call you when I'm ready to come home." All Might said, "You could have just borrowed the car, right?" Izuku smiled and said, "I know. I'm just nervous, and this made me feel better." Izuku knocked on the door, and Tsuyu opened the door, and when she saw the flowers and chocolates, she turned bright red. Satsuki saw Izuku and ran to him, jumping up to give him a hug. Izuku reflexively opened his arms and caught her, causing her to squeal in delight. Baru and Ganma walked into the room, asking Satsuki to let him enter the house before smothering him. Baru took the flowers and chocolates, and Ganma shook his hand when his daughter finally let him go. Izuku looked at Tsuyu and asked her if she was okay. This caused her to blush even more. Her younger brother Sammy Dare walked in and asked Tsuyu if he was her boyfriend. Tsuyu actually croaked at this statement, then scolded her brother. "He bought you flowers and chocolates." Izuku began to blush and said that the flowers and chocolates were for the family. Ganma said thank you and that dinner was ready. "Please follow me to the dining room." They all sat at the table. Satsuki sat next to him as they ate. Izuku began to relax during the meal as they all spoke. Ganma asked him how did he save his daughters during the fight. "We all saw the news footage. I was amazed when you disappeared." Izuku began to feel uncomfortable, but he began to tell him. This was her father, and he deserved to know the truth. Izuku lifted his hand, and the flowers that he bought lifted off the table and floated over to Satsuki. Then he vanished and reappeared next to him, which made her gasp. "My quirk is very flexible, and I train hard every day to get better with it." Ganma smiled. "I see. I'm just grateful for what you have done for us. Just know that you're always welcome in our house." Izuku thanked him and took his seat again. This feeling of acceptance was so new to him, he had a hard time accepting it. The only people he ever really felt comfortable around were his father and the professors. Izuku began to feel a little choked up with these new emotions. Baru noticed how he was dealing with these emotions and understood how emotionally closed in he was. After they finished the meal and spoke a little longer, Izuku called his dad to pick him up. 20 minutes later, his dad honked the horn as Izuku said goodbye. Satsuki looked sad, and before he left, she asked him, "Will I be able to see you again?" Izuku kneeled down and smiled at her. "Of course you will." This time he pulled her into a hug, and she whispered in his ear before he stood up. Baru smiled at that sight, not just for her daughter, but for Izuku. She knew that this was hard for him. He was able to open up just to make a little girl happy, even if it was for a little while. All Might asked him if he enjoyed himself. Izuku told him that he felt awkward at first, but as the evening went on, he began enjoying himself. Then he told him about the little girl who whispered in his ear that he was her hero when he hugged her before he left. Tsuyu was sitting in the living room, looking out the window deep in thought, when her mother sat next to her and asked her what's wrong. Tsuyu said that she embarrassed herself today when Izuku arrived. All she did was blush, and she even croaked in front of him. She was afraid that he was going to think that she was weird. Baru hugged her daughter. When Tsuyu continued speaking, "Mom, I just found out today that he is single, and he has never had a girlfriend. I like him, but does a girl like me even have a chance with him?" You should have seen the look on the other girls' faces when he said that. They looked at him like he was a piece of meat for sale at the market. Baru looked at her daughter and smiled, and said, "You'll never know unless you try." Then she asked if she saw Izuku blushing when your brother asked if he was your boyfriend. Tsuyu smiled. Did he really blush? Baru said, "Ask your brother if you don't believe me." That statement made Tsuyu happy, and she kissed her mother on the cheek and said goodnight. Achiko couldn't sleep that night. Izuku was not only single, he has never had a girlfriend or been out on a date. This had to be a lie. How is it that someone like him remained single this long? Achiko remembered when she asked him for his number when she worked at the cat cafe. He said he didn't have a phone. Did his parents not let him date? She wanted to ask him out on a date, but her family was already struggling to pay the bills. She didn't have the money to go out on a date. Why would someone like him be interested in a girl whose family was barely making it? She sighed as she stared up at the ceiling before falling asleep. When Momo arrived at her mansion, she very excited. She saw the new footage of him saving to. In her mind, a guy like that was always spoken for. She was surprised when he said that he was single. She was shocked that he never had a girlfriend or been out on a date. Izuku was smart, strong, a great fighter, and he wasn't a playboy. She paid attention to him in class. He never looked at any of the girls in a perverted way, unlike most of the guys in the class, especially Mineta and Kaminari. He was respectful, humble, and most importantly, he didn't care about anyone's background. He treated everyone the same. If you needed help, he was happy to assist. He was honestly a great guy, and in a short period of time that she has known him, she couldn't understand why he was single. She knew that she needed to learn more about him before she could introduce him to her family. Izuku sat in his room thinking about how he felt when Satsuki said that he was her hero. Now, for the first time, he really understood why his father loved being a hero. He wanted to live up to that little girl's expectations. He had to become stronger and better so that his father could retire and enjoy life. He couldn't forget the look Achiko gave him when she asked him if he was dating someone. He wondered why she wanted to know if he was in a relationship. I'll ask Dad about that later. For now, he needed to focus on the task at hand, becoming the best hero he could be. With that settled, he shut off the lights and went to sleep. The next couple of weeks flew by. They went over their mistakes in the combat course and went over tactics. They alternated focusing on their quirks and hand-to in combat. Izuku spoke with Professor Aizawa, trying to learn more about how his neutralizing quirk works. Izuku knew that if he could learn how to use his quirk, capturing villains would be easier. Bakugo focused on larger attacks after Izuku dodged his big attacks. Izuku also would spend time with Recovery Girl, learning more healing techniques. In their hand-to-hand classes, they learned how to hit and get hit. Mineta tried to get paired up with a female. Professor Aizawa told the class no quirks during the hand-to-hand portion of this class. Bakugo said this was stupid. Professor Aizawa said, "Really? Okay, then attack me." Bakugo asked, "Can I use my quirk?" Professor Aizawa said, "Sure." "You're going to regret this," Bakugo said with an evil grin on his face. Professor Aizawa just smiled and said, "Please teach me the errors of my ways." Bakugo rushed in and tried to hit him with a jab. When he missed, he tried to use his quirk, but it didn't work. Professor Aizawa used his scarf to bind Bakugo and said a real hero can still fight even without his quirk. Then he looked at the class. "You never know if someone can neutralize your quirk like I can. You can learn to overcome this by honing in on your hand-to-hand skills, or you can die. These are your choices." The class looked at the professor, shocked with how easily he took Bakugo down. The class took this lesson to heart and began to double down on their hand-to-hand training. The following Monday, Izuku wasn't himself. He was sullen when Tsuyu asked him if it was okay. He gave her a quick smile and said he was fine. When he went to his seat, she could tell that he wasn't. Tsuyu took her seat and leaned back and asked Achiko if what was wrong with Izuku. Achiko said she asked him before they entered, and she got the same answer. Momo asked Mina if she knew what was wrong with Izuku. Mina was up on all of the gossip. Even Mina didn't know. She approached Tsuyu and Achiko and asked if they knew what was wrong. After class was over, Izuku quietly packed his bag and left. Achiko knew. Momo and Mina decided to follow him. Izuku walked into a flower shop and walked out with a set of beautiful flowers. He got on the train and got off at Koyasan Station and walked into the Okanoin Cemetery. The girls continued to follow him without him noticing. He went to a grave and began to clean it. He reached into his bag and pulled out some incense, a candle, and a picture, and gently placed it on the grave. To their amazement, the incense and candle lit up on their own. He got down on his knees and began to speak, but they were too far away to hear what he said. But the voice that came from behind them almost made them scream out in surprise. All Might said that he comes here every year to talk to his mother. Professor Aizawa said we always give him some time to himself before we join him. Professor Midnight said he doesn't like us to see him at his weakest. All Might said thank you for caring enough to follow him, but I suggest that you don't let him know that you were here for now. He really doesn't like this part of his life, so for now, let's keep this our secret. Then the professors went to Izuku, and he began to weep. As the girls left, Momo made a phone call, and in a few minutes, a large SUV arrived. Then she stepped in and asked the other two girls to join her. When the girls were in, Momo said, "Please take us to the house." Achiko asked, "What do you think All Might meant when he said that he doesn't like this part of his life?" Momo said, "Let's talk about this when we arrive at my house." She picked up the phone and made another call. "Have tea for 4 and some cake ready when I arrive." When they arrived, Achiko Tsuyu and Mina were in awe of how large her house was. When they entered her room, the conversation began again. Why were the professors there? Tsuyu asked. What happened to his mother? Mina asked. Izuku said that Aizawa was like an uncle to him. Does that mean that the teachers are raising him? Momo asked. Achiko said, All Might is raising him. It all makes sense now that I think about it. All Might went looking for him when I was with Recovery Girl after the entrance exam. All Might grabbed food for him and was with him when he went to visit me at the cat cafe. Now he's at the cemetery with him, Achiko said. The girls were all staring at her mouths open as she was stating the facts. Momo looked at her and asked her, just now realizing this. Achiko blushed at the time. I really didn't think about it. I thought All Might was in charge of watching over him because of him breaking the law, Achiko said. Oh, that makes sense now that you put it like that, Momo said. Mina looked at the other girls and could barely contain herself. Do you know what this means? We now know the biggest secret in the school. No, the biggest secret in Japan, Mina said. Momo looked at Mina and said, You can't tell anyone. The professors will know. It was one of us that leaked a secret. Achiko looked sad at that statement. He would never forgive us if we revealed this secret. Tsuyu looked at Mina and said, You can't tell anyone. My sister would be devastated if she couldn't see him anymore. Is your sister dating him? Momo exclaimed. Tsuyu said, No, raising her hands in a mock surrender. She showed the girls a picture of her with her little sister. All three went, she cute. My mom invited him over to my house for dinner after he saved us, and my sister has the biggest crush on him. It would break her heart if he walks away from us because of this. The four girls swore to keep this secret to themselves. As Izuku, All Might, and the professors left the cemetery, Izuku said, You would think that this would get easier for me with time, but still hurts. Midnight looked at him and simply said, You need to learn how to let go of the pain. If you don't, one day it will break you. This wasn't your fault, and your mom wouldn't want you to be alone and sad. She gave up her life so that you could have one, so please learn to live for her sake. Izuku lifted his head and said, I'll try. Good, she said, pulling him into her chest as she hugged him, and this time he didn't struggle to escape. He hugged her back, and in a soft voice he said thanks as she hugged him a little tighter. AFO called Dr. Garaki into his room and said the class will go to the USJ soon. Tell Shigaraki to get ready. I'm handing him All Might and his students on a silver platter. Tell him to enjoy himself, take as many pawns as he wants. Bring All Might and the hero's pain. All he has to do is bring me my son in one piece. The doctor smiled and said, Yes, master, I'll let him know to be prepared. How much time does he have to get ready? 2 weeks, All Might, and 2 more teachers should be there. As the doctor left, AFO smiled. I hope you enjoy the gift I prepared for you, All Might. I can't wait to see how my son has grown. As the students were loading the bus in their hero costumes, they were very excited that we're going to train on rescue operations. Izuku was excited. He couldn't wait to try out his new techniques. He's been working hard on extending his sphere of influence. Now his sphere of influence reached 18 feet thanks to his training. Tsuyu was sitting next to him on the bus. Achiko and Momo sat next to each other, a little jealous of her, especially after she fell asleep on his shoulder and he let her snuggle in. Mina pulled out her phone and snapped a picture of that, saying she now had blackmail pictures. Achiko, Momo, Mina, and Tsuyu all noticed that a lot of girls were starting to be especially nice to Izuku after word got out that he was single and has never been out on a date. Even at lunch, girls from different classes tried to sit next to him. Izuku himself was too dense or too nice. Notice sometimes when they came up to him in a group, he would move to another table so they could all sit with each other unaware of their plan. Momo thought it was adorable that he was so naive. Achiko and Tsuyu just got jealous with all of the girls trying to get his attention. Mina didn't know how she felt. She wasn't a dopey nice guys, but Izuku was proving to be different. This wasn't an act with him. This is who he truly was, and the image of him in the cemetery was one she would never forget. When they arrived at the unforeseen simulation joint, USJ for short, Professor Aizawa was already there when the students unloaded from the bus. Izuku walked up to him and asked where was All Might. Professor Aizawa said that a mission popped up and he was needed there. Izuku nodded his head and joined his classmates. As they entered the USJ, they were in awe of all of the sections and all of the potential applications this place has. Once they were all inside, the doors shut, and Pro Hero 13 walked up to the students and began giving them their safety brief. Then everything went wrong. An inky black form formed at the bottom of the stairs, and a lot of villains began pouring out of it. The last two were a large one with its brain exposed, the other was a tall one with hands holding his body. Izuku's stomach dropped. He knew who was responsible for this. Professor Aizawa told the students to stand back. Izuku said, "This isn't what you're best at. Watch your professor at work and learn." Izuku knew that this was bad, but he held back. He reached into his costume and pressed the button on his pendant. He also pulled out his cell phone to call for help, and to his horror, there was no signal. Professor Aizawa was a beast in a fight, but the numbers were not in his favor. Izuku was about to act when the inky darkness swallowed the whole class. Next thing, he knew he was in water, and Tsu's tongue was wrapping around his waist, pulling him out of the water. Minato were on a boat surrounded by enemies. Izuku looked towards the land where Aizawa fought for his life and came up with a plan on how to get to him quickly. Tsu was the key to the plan working. Izuku knew he had to show off more of his power than he was comfortable with, but he had no choice. When he explained his plan, Mineta's eyes almost popped out of his head. Tsuyu agreed and got ready. Izuku closed his eyes and focused. The whole boat started to lift out of the water. The villains froze, the sheer power lifting the boat, catching them off guard. Izuku lifted the boat 40 feet in the air, then grunted out, "Now," to who was carrying Mineta, who began to run and leap with all her might. Izuku pushed the boat down with his quirk as hard as he could. The boat hit the water, shattering from the force of the impact. Tsu shot her tongue around Izuku's waist, and the momentum pulled him and slingshot him past her towards Aizawa, who was in really bad shape, being held down by the brain creature. "Damn it, this thing is as strong as All Might without a quirk," Aizawa thought to himself. The man with all of the hands on him walked up to them and said, "Where is All Might? And I'll make sure that your death is quick." "All Might isn't here, and I don't know where he is. Let the kids go. You can have me," Aizawa said. "Sorry, this isn't how this works. I guess I'll start killing the students until All Might show up," said the strange man. The splash caught both men by surprise, but the spear of ice that stabbed the brain creature's shoulder, slamming it off of the professor, really surprised the strange man. Professor Aizawa looked at Izuku and said, "Run." Izuku looked at the man he considered family and said, "No, I refuse to leave you." "Izuku, father wants me to bring you home. I want to kill you," said the strange man. "My name is Tamura Shigaraki, and I don't like what you did to my Nomu, but your little trick won't stop it." Izuku placed himself between Aizawa and Shigaraki and said, "You will not lay another hand on this man." Shigaraki called out, "Nomu, kill them," and in a flash the Nomu was running at Izuku with All Might speed. Izuku lifted his hand, and when the Nomu got within 3 feet of Izuku, it froze in place. Izuku then launched it out of the arena like a cannon, hoping that it was as strong as it looked. Shigaraki began to curse, "You cheated father, didn't tell me you were this strong. I will only say this one, surrender now, or I will stop you the hard way," Izuku said. Without looking over his shoulder, Izuku said, "Please take Professor Aizawa to safety." Tsu and Mineta gently lifted him up and left Izuku with Shigaraki. "Do you have any idea how badly father wants me to bring you back?" Shigaraki said. Then he struck. He was quick, but compared to All Might, he might as well been moving in slow motion. Izuku dodged his attack and punched him across his jaw, staggering Shigaraki. "You dare to hit me to hell with what, father? Once I'm going to kill you, then all of your friends." Izuku noticed that Shigaraki's gloves stated to disintegrating, so he jumped back closer to the water. Shigaraki rushed him again. Izuku used his quirk, lifting droplets of water, freezing them, and launching at Shigaraki's legs. Just like bullets, they struck. Shigaraki screamed out in pain as he dropped to his knees. Then there was an explosion, and the doors to the USJ flew off their hinges, and All Might stood there, anger etched into his face. The inky cloud formed around Shigaraki, then he was gone. All Might was a blur, taking down criminals in seconds. By the time the rest of staff showed up, between All Might and the rest of the students, most of the criminals had been captured. Shigaraki collapsed once he formed out of the inky darkness. "Father, he's a lot stronger than we thought. He took down the Nomu like it was nothing. He didn't even hesitate when he shot both of my legs like we thought he would," Shigaraki said. Before I could gather up the remaining forces, All Might arrived, and I was barely able to escape thanks to Hirojiri. How close did the Nomu get before it was launched away from the fight? Asked AFO. It got within 3 feet of him, Shigaraki said. Still so weak I expected more from him. After all this time, I would have expected at least 12 feet or more, AFO said. Dr. Garaki entered the room and inspected Shigaraki's legs. Do you know what he shot you with? I see entry wounds, but no exit wounds, the doctor asked. I think he used ice. He nearly took the Noma's arm off with a spear made of ice, Shigaraki said. That would explain why there is no bullets in your legs, just entry wounds, the doctor said. He turned water into ice and shot it at you with the force of a real gun. Maybe he's not as weak as he's letting us think he is, said AFO. But don't worry about losing Tamura. Think about what you need to do next time, said AFO. While Izuku was healing Professor Aizawa when the ambulance showed up and rushed him to the hospital. The rest of the class was with All Might giving statements on what happened. Izuku was jogging up to his classmates when Bakugo yelled out, "Hey nerd, what the hell is your quirk? Mineta told me that you lifted the yacht 40 feet in the air, then you made a spear of ice from the water," Bakugo said. Before Izuku could speak, All Might cleared his throat, getting the students' attention. All right, everyone load up, so we can get back to UA so that the heroes and the police can investigate the area, All Might said. The students loaded the bus, and Izuku found himself in between Achiko and Momo, both snuggled in like Tsu did on the way in. Mineta was staring at Izuki like he owed him money. Kyokujiro called Mineta out on his staring, and he simply stated that it wasn't fair that Izuku was hogging all the cute girls. Jiro rolled her eyes and said maybe if you weren't such a pervert, a girl would sit next to you. When Izuku got home that afternoon, he almost forgot about his appointment with Dr. Azui. He called his father and asked him to pick him up. When Dr. Azui's heard the knock on the door without the standard phone call, she was slightly confused. She always got a phone call. When she opened the door, Izuku and All Might stood there, the later one out of costume. Izuku smiled and said, "I told you that he was the strongest, kindest man I knew." Dr. Azui invited them in and asked them to sit as she regained her composure. "I take it that you can make others disappear as well?" Dr. Azui asked. Izuku smiled. "I did say that I'm working hard on improving my skills." "All Might, can I ask you why Izuku has never been on a date, or why he has such a hard time opening up to people?" Dr. Azui asked. All Might looked at Izuku and said because he is afraid that whoever gets too close to him will get hurt by his past. "I try to give him a normal life, but his father has made that very difficult," All Might said. "That man is not my father. He has done nothing but bring me pain. You're the only man that I will call father. You're the one who raised me, taught me, and gave me a safe place to live," Izuku said. Dr. Azui didn't expect this. She thought that All Might kept him sheltered, but it was Izuku's decision. "Izuku, why is it that you train so hard to improve when you are so strong? Right now, don't you want to spend time with friends?" Dr. Azui asked. Izuku looked at the doctor and said, "I could have stopped 2 criminals from escaping had I was able to use Professor Aizawa's technique, but I haven't mastered it yet. It's okay to fail if I haven't mastered a technique, yet it's not okay to fail because I didn't put in the effort to get better," Izuku said. Dr. Azui was amazed by his resolve and felt a pang of pain for her daughter or any woman that fell for this young man. Professor Aizawa walked into the classroom to everyone's surprise. He was bandaged up, but he looked a lot better than he did after the villain attack. "Okay, class, next week we're going on a small road trip with Class 1B for some joint training. You're going to be gone for a week," the professor said. Mineta began to drool with that thought in his head, picturing all of the girls around him. Izuku was interested as well. He wanted to see what their quirks were. Bakugo is still angry with Izuku. He never answered him about his quirk. What's worse, he personally saved Professor Aizawa from that beast by himself. Momo was thinking about how she was going to get Izuku alone for a while. Little did she know, she wasn't the only girl thinking about stealing Izuku away. Izuku changed into his gym clothes to get ready for combat training. Bakugo wanted to fight Izuku so bad he could taste it. But Professor Aizawa had a randomizer program that paired up the students. During the combat portion of class, Izuku was paired up against Toru Hagakure. She was invisible all the time. Izuku felt really awkward trying to fight her. He didn't want to touch her inappropriately because he couldn't see her. Toru, on the other hand, didn't have any issue with attacking him. She punched him in the gut, then quickly across the jaw. It really didn't hurt him, but he didn't like getting hit in the face. He could feel her moving in his area of influence, but he didn't know how to stop her from hitting him. They weren't allowed to use their quirks during close combat. "Hey, Izuku, if you can't hit me once during this fight, you have to let me give you a kiss," Toru said. Every girl in the gym stopped what they were doing. Some missed out on a hit, and some took a hit. Izuku said, "This is a fight, not a date. I want to put an incentive on the board, one to make you want to hit me, and one to make sure that you don't hit me," Toru said. "I understand if you're scared that you won't be able to hit me," she teased. Izuku gave a slight smile and said, "Just one hit, fine," and he closed his eyes and said, "Whenever you're ready." Izuku didn't move. He kept his eyes closed, focusing as hard as he could. Toru began circling him, being as quiet as she could, getting closer to him. When she punched him in the ribs, he reflexively countered with a punch, and she felt the air off that punch. She didn't realize that he was that fast. She needed to be careful, or he would hit her. Once again, Izuku didn't move. He was listening, using all of his senses, and unfortunately for Toru, he had a different plan. When she kicked him, he was able to grab her leg and punched her thigh. There was a sigh of relief from the other girls, who began their fighting again, now that Izuku's lips were safe. Toru, on the other hand, was disappointed with herself. She lost a chance to be Izuku's first kiss. The girls all surrounded Toru in the locker room and asked her what was that all about. Toru smiled. "For trying. I don't stand out like you do, so if I could steal his first kiss, why not try?" So you looked at her and asked her, "Do you like him?" "I don't know," Toru said. "He is cute and shy, honest, and he does have a smoking body, but he doesn't let anyone get close to him." The other girls agreed with her. Momo looked at Tsuyu and asked her how did she manage to get Izuku over for dinner. "My mom ran into him on the streets and invited him over to say thank you for saving me and my sister." Izuku was changing after gym when Bakugo came up to him and said, "Be glad you didn't have to fight me, I'd crush you." Izuku finished getting dressed and simply said, "I guess that I'm glad," and walked away. Bakugo was furious. No matter what he did, he couldn't get under Izuku's skin. Izuku went back to the classroom and saw Professor Aizawa waiting for him. Izuku began trying to cancel the professor's quirk, and after months of trying, he finally succeeded. Izuku almost shouted out in joy, finally able to cancel quirks. "Thank you for taking your time to show me this," Izuku said. Aizawa looked him in the eyes and said, "It's the least I could do after you saved me. But our time is up, and you don't want to be late for Recovery Girl's lessons, and I don't want her to be upset with me for holding you up," Aizawa said. With that, Izuku left, and the rest of his day flew by. The girls of Class 1B were all sitting together, laying out a plan on how to get Izuku away from his class. They all agreed that he was way too good for the girls of Class 1A. They just didn't know how to get him away from his class. Flirting didn't work. He would just blush and change direction in the hallways. They knew if they tried to lure him off with them, the girls of 1A would get involved. They even tried leaving letters in his wall locker for him to meet up with them, and he never showed up. But they all agreed come next week they would have a plan. Class 1A loaded up into the charter bus for their class trip. They would be gone for 2 weeks for training on their individual quirks. When the bus stopped at the scenic lookout, there was a large SUV already there with 2 pretty women standing by it. Professor Aizawa asked them to step out of the bus so that he could introduce them. Izuku knew them instantly, not because he met them before, but because of their success rate in wilderness rescue. It was part of his studies when the professors were teaching him growing up, showing him that marital skills wasn't the only way to save people. The women introduced themselves as Pixie Bob and Ragdoll, retired pro heroes that now rescue lost hikers in wilderness and mountain terrain. Ragdoll pointed toward the mountain, which was a few miles away, and said that's where their base camp is located. She also said that they should make it there in about 4 hours by foot. When she was done talking, Izuku noticed that his area of influence vanished. When he looked at Professor Aizawa, the professor simply said, "Your training starts now." The entire class was thrown off the side of the cliff thanks to Pixie Bob's quirk. Ragdoll yelled out, "Feel free to use your quirks. We'll see you at the camp." When the class arrived, they were all exhausted as they limped in for dinner. The smell of a food lifted most of their spirits. Izuku found himself being herded by the girls in his class. This time he was tired, so he just rolled with it. While he was eating, he saw a little boy doing his chores. He was about 10 years old. The girls all chatted while they ate. Izuku reflected on what he could have done better. Izuku saw the little boy struggling to lift a box. Izuku went to help the little boy. Kota was trying his best to lift a box when a young man walked up to him and asked if he needed help. Izuku was surprised by his answer. I don't need your help, you want to be. Izuku said, fine, I won't help you lift it, but let me show you a trick to pick it up. Kota looked at Izuku pick it up and put it back down, and when he tried to pick it up this time, he was able to lift it. Izuku walked with the boy using his quirk to help the boy without him knowing. When Kota was done, he looked at Izuku and said, I told you that I didn't need you. Izuku smiled and said, you were right, and began to walk back to his seat. Kota called out to him and asked him for his name. Izuku turned his head and told him. The girls were all staring at Izuku when he got back to his seat. Toru asked, are you always that nice? Izuku was caught by surprise by this question and asked, what do you mean? I know you used your quirk to help that boy that didn't want your help. Izuku smiled and said it was the right thing to do, plus I didn't have any siblings to help me. So if I can help, why not? A kindness costs nothing. Izuku got up and said, I'm going to take a shower. Now I'll see you tomorrow. The girls said goodbye, and he left, leaving them to talk about him. Izuku was the first one in the shower and then the open-air bath. When the rest of the males in his class showed up, that was already getting ready to leave, Kaminari spoke with him long enough for him to see Mineta fall off the wall while trying to peek at the girls on the other side, because Kota scared him, but Kota slipped. Izuku reacted fast enough to catch Kota thanks to his quirk. When Kota opened his eyes, he saw that the young man that showed him how to lift the box was carrying him, and his Aunt Shino was with them. Izuku gently placed him on the sofa and placed a blanket over him. Kota looked at Izuku and said, thank you, mister. I'm sorry I was mean to you earlier. It's okay. What's your name? Izuku asked. My name is Kota, and thank you for saving me. Izuku smiled and said, you're welcome, and I'll see you tomorrow. Kota, get some rest. Shino was dumbfounded. Kota was being nice to this young man. Kota didn't like anyone that had anything to do with heroes. May I ask you a question? Shino asked. Sure, Izuku said. What did you do to Kota? He really hates heroes and anything that has to do with them, but he just thanked you, and he was very sincere about it. I didn't do anything. I showed him how to pick something up. That's all Izuku said. I want to thank you anyway. After he lost his parents, he's been angry, Shino said. They were both pro-heroes, and they were killed by a villain while saving lives, leaving him alone. To be honest, I think when he get old enough, he will leave us because we were heroes. Izuku smiled and said, you're welcome. I really didn't do anything, but if I can help him, I will. The girls were all talking about Izuku after they found out that he saved the little boy from falling. Tsuyu said Izuku has to be one of the nicest people she has ever meet. She told them how he stayed to comfort her little sister when he could have just vanished. Mina said, I thought it all was an act at first. Achiko told them how nice he was when he would visit her old job after he saved her. The other girls looked at her. He saved you too? Achiko told them what happened, and the girls all agreed this is truly who Izuku is. As Class 1B arrived at the training area, Class 1 it was already hard at work training. They quickly found all of Class 1, except for 2, Izuku and Toru, nowhere to be found. Toru was being hunted by Mizo Shoji, which left Izuku unaccounted for. When it was lunchtime, Izuku came staggering out of the woods sweating. Izuku smiled when Momo called him to join them in line. The girls of Class 1B followed Izuku and lined up right behind him. A girl said, excuse me, Izuku. When he turned around, he saw a cute girl with horns. My name is Pony Tsunatori. I wanted to meet with you for a while. I was there the day you saved those girls, and it touched my heart when you calmed the little girl down. Izuku turned beet red and lowered his head. I didn't mean to embarrass you, Pony said. Izuku lifted his head and apologized to Pony. I'm not used to receiving compliments. You're right, I bet that you love being the center of attention, Nito, Monoma said. All of the girls of Class 1B turned and said, shut up. Tsuyu said that Izuku is one of the most humble and sweetest people that you will ever meet. The girls of Class 1A pushed Izuku up to the front of the line to get him away from Class 1B. Kota heard, stand up for Izuku. Those weren't words that you hear when you spoke about heroes. Kota needed to go for a walk to clear his head. Izuku was back in the woods working on strengthening his quirk by lifting extremely heavy boulders, then dropping them on his shield when he realized that it was dinner time. When Izuku arrived at the camp, Achiko called him over to the table. She had a plate of food waiting for him. He said thanks for the food, and the other girls from his class joined them. The girls of Class 1B were still angry with Nito Monoma for ruining their chance to sit with Izuku. After dinner, Izuku went to the fire pit in the center of camp and started a fire and sat down humming a tune. He was quickly joined by the girls of his class. Mina asked him what was the song he was humming. Izuku said that it was a song that reminds him of his mother. Itsuka Kendo asked, "Are you homesick?" as she and the rest of the girls of Class 1B showed up. "I think that it's sweet that he misses his mom," Pony said. Achiko, who, Momo, and Mina remembered him at the cemetery. Izuku spoke in a soft voice and said that he does miss his mom. "Could you please sing that song for us?" Kyoka asked. "I'm not really good singer," Izuku said. "Please could you sing it for me?" Pony asked. Izuku looked around the fire pit and saw all of the girls were looking at him, so he gave in. Izuku said the song is Where the Shadow Ends by Banners. Achiko, Momo, and Mina were in tears. The others were confused by such a sad song. When Izuku was done singing, he quickly excused himself to compose himself. Izuku used his quirk to vanish and lifted himself into the air and found a plateau on the side of a hill by a cave. When he arrived, he sat on the plateau, looking back towards the camp. He had tears streaming down his face when he heard the soft voice of Koda coming from the mouth of the cave. "Are you okay?" Koda asked. Izuku quickly wiped the tears from his eyes. "I'm sorry to bother you. I thought I was alone. I'll leave if you want me to," Izuku said. "Why were you crying?" Koda asked. Izuku looked at Koda and said, "Because I miss my mother. She died when I was still a child." "Did your dad die too?" Koda asked. "No, he didn't, but he hasn't been in my life," Izuku said. Koda said, "You're almost like me. I lost both my parents to a villain. They died saving strangers and left me behind. I hate this place. People come here to train to be heroes, to throw away their lives fighting villains for people they don't even know," Koda said. "Why do you want to be a hero?" "Everyone says you're really nice," Koda said. "I want to become a hero so that I can stop villains from hurting others, so that there won't be more children losing their parents like you and me," Izuku said. Koda sat next to Izuku in silence, and both of them were now looking toward the camp. Itsuka looked at Achiko, Momo, and Mina and asked them what happened. "That was a lot more than just missing his mom," Itsuka said. Achiko said that this wasn't their story to tell and that they shouldn't bring it up to him for a while. Pony looked at the girls from Class 1A and asked them if they knew if he was still single. Momo asked her, "Why do you want to know?" Pony smiled at her and said that she was serious about what she said about him touching her heart when she saw him comforting the little girl. Mina looked at her and said, "Your class has plenty of boys to choose from. Pick one of them." All of the girls from Class 1A were looking at the girls from Class 1B as potential rival for Izuku's affection. When the girls put out the fire and went back to their cabin, "I think that Pony girl was getting way too friendly with Izuku," Momo said. "I know, right? Could you please sing it for me with those big flirty eyes?" Mina said. "We need to keep those girls away from him," Tiu said. Meanwhile, the girls of Class 1B were talking about how Pony made Izuku blush and how cute he looked when he was embarrassed. "I have an idea," Reiko said. "A test of courage. We can get him in the woods by himself. Then we can get him of ourselves, and Pony won't get to hog all of his attention this time. All we have to do is convince Class 1A. In the morning, they were able to convince Class 1A to participate in the test of courage. Izuku was out in the woods, practicing on focusing everything moving inside his sphere of influence, trying to track everything moving. When he realized that he was no longer alone, someone was trying to sneak up on him. Izuku created an illusion of himself, still sitting cross-legged, while the real him backed up, invisible to anyone looking. When Izuku heard a twig crack, he used his quirk to cancel out everyone else's quirk in his sphere of influence. When he heard her squeal out, he realized his mistake. Toru was there naked and blushing. She was leaning in to kiss the illusion when she became completely visible for the first time since her quirk manifested. Izuku turned beet red as the two of them locked eyes. When his illusion vanished, she had pretty eyes. They were hazel. She had full pouty lips. Izuku said, "I'm so sorry." Toru squatted. Doing her best to try to cover herself, Izuku released his quirk and she vanished again. Toru picked up a branch and threw it at Izuku, yelling, "I can't believe you saw me naked," and he heard her running back to camp. Izuku was so embarrassed, he didn't even go back for lunch. Toru entered the camp running when she saw Mina training and ran straight to her and told her what happened. Mina called all of the girls from Class 1A over and explained to them what happened. Toru expected them to be angry with her for trying to steal his first kiss or for him seeing her naked. But they were all curious about what she looked like. Toru said, "I can't let him see me. I'm so embarrassed right now." She felt better when he didn't show for lunch, but when he showed up for dinner, she hid in the cabin and refused to join in the test of courage. Izuku walked up to Achiko and asked her if she had seen Toru because he needed to apologize to her again. Achiko looked at him and her heart sank. He looked defeated. She could see how hurt he was. Achiko said, "It was an accident. We know you didn't mean to." Izuku asked. The rest of the girls showed up, and when they saw the look of hurt on his face. "So you said we all know that you didn't do it on purpose." They tried to cheer him up, but failed. Izuku excused himself and walked away. When it was time for the test of courage, Izuku found himself alone because his class was one short. But as he entered the woods, he smelled smoke. Students came running out of the woods, saying that there was a massive fire. Ragdoll was calling out for Kota. Izuku knew he was at the cave. Izuku called out to Ragdoll and said, "I'll get Kota, find the rest of the students." Izuku used his quirk and lifted the patch of ground he was on and shot off like a bullet towards the cave. Kota was looking out over the trees, standing on the plateau, when he saw the fire. Then he heard a voice behind him. It was a large man wearing a hooded jacket. "Hey, kid, I like your hat. How about you give it to me?" the large man said. Kota was afraid, but he said, "No, my parents bought me this hat. You can't have it." The large man tossed his hood back, and Kota recognized him. He was the man that killed his parents. "You killed my parents," Kota yelled at the large man. "Kid, I've killed a lot of people. My parents were the water hose heroes, and you killed them," Kota yelled. Muscular started laughing. "No way, those were your parents. They took my eye and left me this scar," and he stepped forward. "But don't worry, kid, you're going to join them. It will be quick and painless." Izuku saw Kota, and Muscular was moving towards Kota and getting larger. Izuku willed himself to move as fast as he could. Kota fell back in fear, and without realizing it, he yelled out for Izuku. Muscular leaped and threw his punch. Kota felt himself being yanked backwards and up, but he couldn't take his eyes off the man that killed his parents. The ground where Kota was lying just seconds ago exploded with the force of the punch. Kota was now behind Izuku and said, "That is the villain Muscular. He killed my parents." Izuku felt the rage flowing through him. Muscular smiled and said, "You're fast, kid, but don't worry, kid, both of you will join them here really soon." Izuku said, "Kota, please close your eyes. I don't want you to see this." Kota closed his eyes. Izuku said, "You like to scare people. Let me show you real fear." Muscular said, "Bring it, kid," and before his eyes, Izuku's body began to ripple, and he grew to about 8 feet tall, and a black aura surrounded him. His eyes turned white. Muscular felt the heat from the black fire that was now surrounding Izuku. He looked like an evil monster. Muscular screamed out in fear. Muscular saw the monster Izuku reach out faster than anything that large should, and grabbing the heat burned him when he got lifted and thrown into the mountain. Muscular began pushing himself out of the rubble when he was grabbed again. An evil voice said, "You're stronger than I, though. Let's test how tough you are." Izuku used his quirk to lift him again and threw him harder. Muscular body fell limply to the ground. Izuku released the illusion and turned to Kota and asked, "Are you all right?" Kota opened his eyes and said, "I'm okay." Izuku kneeled and hugged Kota and said, "I'm glad you're okay, but we have to go." Dabi froze when he heard Muscular scream out in what sounded like fear. What could even scare that crazy man? Then they heard an explosion and half of the mountain crumpled. Toga looked at him. "What do we do now?" He was supposed to cover our escape. Spinner looked at them and said, "I don't want to try to fight whatever caused that." Mange said, "Let's hurry before the heroes get involved and things get even harder." "You're right, Mange, let's hurry and find Izuku before whatever that was behind us decides to join this party," Dabi said. "Okay, we need to split up. Toga, go out and harass the students. Keep them panicking," Dabi said. "Mange and Spinner, you go to the camp and see if Izuku is there. If he is, capture him and send the signal." Dabi continued twice, and I will stay here. He will make doubles of me, and I'll attack the staff and set fires. The 3 Nomu will find the strong opponents and try to capture or kill the staff. Now go before they can call for reinforcements, Dabi said. They all split their separate ways. Izuku was carrying Koda when he saw Professor Aizawa and called out to him. Professor Aizawa stopped running, and Izuku was in front of him in a flash. Please take Koda and take it back to camp. Izuku, wait, you know that they are probably after you, right? Professor Aizawa said. I know, Izuku said, but I have to help. Izuku, please don't go, you can get hurt, or worse, please stay with me, Koda pleaded. Izuku looked at Koda and said, I have to protect the other students like I protected you. That's what it means to be a hero, Izuku said. But he shot up into the air, looking for students that needed his help. Izuku saw Momo trying to defend herself from a Nomu and shot down in her direction. When the Nomu got within range of his quirk, Izuku threw him back into the wood line hard. He quickly helped Momo up using his quirk to heal her when he heard the Nomu rushing towards them. Izuku leaned her against a tree and told her, please don't move. When the Nomu exploded out of the tree line right at him, Izuku used his quirk and ripped a tree out of the ground and hit the Nomu like a baseball, shattering the tree with the force of the impact. Quickly, he hurried back to Momo, healing her and telling her to run back to camp. Momo looked at him and asked, what about you? I'm going to help the others by becoming bait, so please run. Back to me, Momo said. Izuku said, I'll do my best. Momo took off, running towards the camp. Izuku ran parallel to her, making a lot of noise, trying to draw attention, and it worked. 2 Nomu rushed him at the same time, form opposite side. Izuku formed a shield with his quirk, and a strike from the first Nomu bounced off. Izuku used his quirk and hit the Nomu with a punch that had enough kinetic energy to derail a train, and it flew into a tree, shattering the tree into splinters. Izuku turned and used his quirk to hit the other Nomu with a bolt of lightning strong enough to drop a rhino. The second Noma dropped to its knees, but the first Noma was already charging him again. Izuku used his quirk and lifted the ground he was on and flew closer to the camp, keeping both Nomu away from the camp and charging him from the same side. You're not going to get past me, Izuku said. Show me what you've got. Momo got to the camp and saw the professors fighting villains. He's not here, one of them yelled. Momo used her quirk and made a net gun and fired it and caught a lizard-looking villain that was fighting with Ragdoll. Momo asked her who were they looking for when Professor Aizawa shot out of the wood line carrying Koda. Ragdoll shouted Koda and ran towards Aizawa. Aizawa put Koda down and he ran to his aunt and hugged her. Are you all right, Koda? Did anyone hurt you? Ragdoll asked. No, Koda, said Izuku. Saved me from Muscular, then gave me to Mr. Aizawa to bring me here. Where's Izuku? Ragdoll asked the professor. He stayed behind to help rescue more students and to act like bait to draw the more powerful ones away from here. He saved me from one of the brain creatures, Momo verified. Powerful explosions could be heard out in the woods. Bakugo looked out towards the woods as Kirishima said, I thought explosions were your thing to him. Bakugo said, shut up, that's got to be one hell of a fight. Izuku was vexed. How do I stop them without killing them, he thought. He broke their limbs and they just fixed themselves. He even used his quirk and cut one for their limbs off. It just grew back. As he was focused of the 2 Nomu, he didn't hear the last one coming until it was too late. It hit him. Izuku was able to get his arm up just in time to prevent the shot from hitting his head. His arm shattered as he flew towards the camp. So, this was the end of part 1 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.